And all right, and we are live. All right, what's up, everybody? What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Kava podcast. As you guys know, my name is Will. I'm the host. Today, I have a very special guest. I know it's a little bit early in the morning. She had to get up on a Monday morning. But I'm very grateful, very appreciative for her to take the time and be able to do this podcast with me. It's one of our Polynesian sisters from all the way from New Zealand. She is a lawyer. She is a model, and I just love her influence and the way she lives her lives. And I definitely I'm so very grateful for her to get on this podcast and let her share her story. But I'll let her introduce herself real quick. So can you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hello, my name is Lanu. I am from New Zealand and Tongan. And yes, I'm a lawyer and I model part-time as well. And yeah, I'm really excited. Thanks for having me, Will.
Thank you. And you forgot to add, I saw a video on the Proud to Be Tongan page. I saw a video of you're also the crush of the Prince of Tonga. I think I am aware.
He's my fiance.
So you can add on to your accomplishment to your career. But that was pretty funny. I saw that on social media. So that was pretty cool.
We're pretty cool. We like to make fun.
So let's get it started. So how did you grow up?
So I grew up in Tonga and in New Zealand. Both my parents, my dad grew up in London and then he moved to Tonga when he was in his late 20s. And my mom grew up in New Zealand and then they both moved back to Tonga. And so I grew up in Tonga for a portion of my life. And then I came to New Zealand while my dad studied. And I guess my childhood was like any ordinary childhood. I used to love playing. I always found myself to, particularly when I was growing up in Tonga, I always felt like I didn't really fit in. And it was because when I was growing up in Tonga, a lot of the time kids used to tease me because they say, oh, she's hafakasi, or, things like that. I mean, it's really not, an offensive thing to say, but when it's like pointing out, especially when you're so young, that you're different from everyone else, then it makes you feel really awkward. And I think I kind of fueled it because it used to really offend me. And I said like, no, like you drama me about it. And so they would always say that. And so it was kind of really hard growing up in Tonga and having that to navigate so young. But, you get through it as you do. And then I moved to New Zealand when I was about 7 or 8. And so that my dad could finish what he was doing and was going to school here in New Zealand. And then you go through the opposite where you're suddenly the only brown kid in the class. And you're just like, oh, what are you? Like, and where did you come from? Like, did you come on a kayak? Like, how did you get here? And so then you're kind of dealing with, the opposite of that. Then I moved back to Tonga again for a brief period of time and then moved permanently back to New Zealand when I was about 11. And I went to boarding school here. And I went to a predominantly white school, really affluent school. And so I guess you're kind of forced to navigate your cultural identity when you're dealing with being, the only brown person in your class, but also having to deal with that so young, it can be difficult, and you don't really want to stand out so much. You kind of just want to like assimilate and like get through life, unnoticed and just go through school. But I don't have that type of personality, so I really struggled a lot to I guess deal with the connotations that come with being brown. Like the school that I went to, a lot of people automatically they're like, oh, your parents are either drug dealers, or you're on a scholarship, or you just got really lucky. And it's an interesting thing to deal with kind of in hindsight, because if you think, man, I can't believe that I let these kind of comments pass.
Yeah.
You just go through life and you really deal with it. And then, after school, in saying that, though, I am really appreciative of the experiences that I did have. And I think that it really helped build up the fundamentals of who I am now. And then, I went to university. I studied law and arts, graduated with my law and arts degree. And then after that, well, in my penultimate year of law school, actually, my mom got really sick with breast cancer. And so we were dealing with the sadness of having to see the person that we love the most suffer and not being able to do anything about it. So suddenly school just became really irrelevant for me. But obviously you don't want to let the one person that you love the most down. So you just kind of hustle along and deal with it. And so finished law school, got both my degrees. And then after that, I decided to take a gap year. So this is about 2016, so the end of 2016. But before I did that, I got admitted to the bar in New Zealand so that I could practice as a lawyer. And then I came back, studied to get my master's in law, specializing in international law. And I did that. And then, now I'm now practicing as a lawyer in New Zealand in regulatory enforcement, prosecution, and litigation.
It's funny when you were talking about your story, and because I know now you're a lawyer, I can only imagine you, like everybody, you being vocal, because you're gonna defend yourself, you're gonna win the argument. So you had a lot of so you had a lot of training. You had a lot of training. You had a lot of training in your childhood. Okay.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you is, and I know this is something that it's different for everybody, and I always want to hear your perspective on it, because you said you grew up in Tonga and you're Tongan, and you grew up in the culture. So I do understand that, especially when it comes to women in the Tongan culture and the Polynesian culture, there are a lot of layers of expectations and of things, how you should live, how you should act, how you should be. And also, and of course, not only from growing up in Tonga, but also coming to a different country from New Zealand and learning to adjust to this culture in New Zealand and of what, or how you should live your lifestyle as a woman. And sometimes that can be very conflicting, right? When you're trying to, as a child, right? Because you're trying to, okay, my parents and my culture telling me to be this way, but then I'm here in this new country and learning new things, spending time with new people and new ways. And then that can very be conflicting. I'm very interested in hearing your side of it. So what was the hardest thing for you? And you said it really well in your story when you talked about your childhood. We try to figure out our self-identity especially when we were younger. That's our time. So when you were trying to figure out who you are, to be confident, to be happy with yourself, to love yourself, and what was the hardest thing about growing up as a Tongan woman within the culture, and you trying to figure out who you are?
I think in terms of my personal self, I was quite lucky because I came from a really supportive, loving, and to be fair, they weren't specific, they didn't specifically adhere to certain cultural practices that I know that a lot of my friends, for example, did. But observing and I guess dealing with the repercussions of what friends and other family members would go through, the one thing that I really struggled to reconcile as a child, and it actually, to be quite honest, made me question whether I wanted to be a part of this, really overbearing culture that's just making people, especially women, feel ashamed. And the thing that I really struggled with was that women were judged for almost anything and everything that they did. And it was, it could literally be a woman going out to a bar and having the best time of her life.
Yep.
Then coming home and then she's slut shamed, everything under the sun. And I really, really struggled with that notion of constantly shaming and judging women for their choices. And there may be times where women and men go through and make choices that probably wasn't the right decision for themselves, but that's something for themselves to reconcile. And that's something for them to live with and deal with. And I think that adding more community shame and then bringing in cultural practices into why it's a shameful thing and judgment it just makes it worse. And so growing up as a woman, I think I really struggled in particular seeing women being judged and shamed, and it just not treated as equally. Particularly men were allowed to go out whenever they want. I mean, they had Kava sessions, and, and if girls even went out, past a particular time, it suddenly all the judgment starts arising. And I think that that's something that I implore all Polynesians to just stop doing. Even if they're doing something that you don't agree with, that's for them to reconcile and that's for them to deal with. Because in some point of our lives, we're all going to do something that other people don't agree with. I mean, there are some people who don't even agree with me being a lawyer, which is just insane to me. But I mean, is that stop me from being a lawyer? No. And so I just think that, that would probably be the number one thing that I really struggled with as a woman, seeing other women go through the judgment and shame and seeing the repercussions of that play out in their lives. It was really sad, actually, for me to witness that.
Yeah, and it's me, my own experience, just listening to you, I remember as a Tongan guy, like we didn't really have any. Our parents didn't really care what we did. Like I could just go, come back. They don't care. But it's funny, you're not aware of it growing up. It's like you're like,
no,
I didn't realize my cousins and my female cousins and my sisters were struggling with that. Because we were, the guys were living in their own world in the household, and then the girls are living in their own world. And also, when I grew up in Tonga, the girls lived inside the house and the guys lived outside the house. Like we never, we never we weren't allowed to be be in the same room. And so I don't know if that's a cultural thing that always happens a lot. So, but now, looking hindsight, and now having conversations now and with women on my podcast talking about that. One of the main things they talk about is just they just feel they feel like so much pressure. That's the word they always use. Like just feel like this pressure, like they have to be perfect, and if they go outside of that, and I see a lot of times they feel like they can never be themselves, and that's why I feel like there's a lot of of them suffer with mental health and depression. Did you feel like that? Did you feel like that? I know you say your family was supportive, but did you feel like an overwhelming pressure to be like this perfect person that everyone expected you to be?
Honestly, this is probably the most boring answer, but no, I really didn't.
Yeah.
I have a really strong personality, and I think that genuinely comes from the unconditional love that I always felt that my mom and dad gave me. And it was always the feeling of, even if I stuffed up, that they weren't going to judge me or shame me, and they were just going to love me. That's something that I always fell back on. That's not to say that I didn't go through pressure from outside, outside influences.
Yeah.
Of course, you feel the pressure of, having to behave a certain way, particularly in cultural contexts and things like that. But I would rather be happy doing something for myself than being unhappy doing something for somebody else. Because at the end of the day, we're all living our life and we're trying to navigate our life. And yes, we're going to go through it as a community, but there's only one person who's experiencing your life, and that's you. So I deal with the pressure in the sense that, it sounds terrible, but if they're not paying my bills, or if I genuinely don't care about their opinion,
that's true. That's true.
Then it's like, okay, that's just one opinion. And these can be people who think that they're super close to me as well. I think that it's people who genuinely know me kind of know, don't waste their time. I'll listen to it. Okay, that's your opinion. I will never disregard an opinion, because sometimes, that's how we learn. Especially with a context that's novel to me. It's like, what you do in this particular context, whatever. But I'll take what I agree with and I'll just run with it. So yeah, I guess I was lucky. I always had the unconditional love of my parents, and even if there were pressures, for example, with my, I can't even for example, with certain cultural duties and things like that, we were always protected from that.
Yeah.
So yeah, sorry, that's probably not quite the answer you wanted to hear,
No,
because
no,
it's not relatable probably. But yeah, no, it's I do see the pressure though, for a lot of other people who, like I said, I can, you know, like my friends, my family, from their, you know, certain like from their, whoever is pressuring them into doing certain things or behaving a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
And I can say that that internalized pressure is probably one of the saddest things to have to witness, because they're not living authentically, they're not living happy, because they constantly need to, you know, behave a certain way and do this and that, because of whoever's watching. And I just find that completely all irrelevant.
You know, I love what you said about how you form your own opinion. I think that's beautiful. That's something that I think a lot of people, especially within our community, needs to hear. And I remember for myself, that was one of the best advice one of my mentors gave me. He said, "Look, you should always form your own opinion. That doesn't mean you don't listen to other people's opinion. Always listen and take other people's opinion into consideration, because, like you said, that's how we learn. Don't be closed-minded. Right? Have an open mind." But no matter who you talk to, no matter how successful they are, no matter what they're in a higher level than you, you should always take their opinion, but always compare it to yours. And that's one thing you always tell me. Look, listen to that, and that's one thing I always do now in my life. Like, I'm always open to anybody's opinion, negative or positive. I love the haters. That means I'm doing something right. So I feed off negativity, but whenever I hear a comment or whenever I hear someone else's opinion, I always want to compare it to my own, and just be like, is there something I can learn from it? Is there truth to it? Right? Because sometimes we don't like to hear the negative opinion, but sometimes we have to hear it. And then if I see that if there is some kind of logic, some truth, some value to it, and I can compare it to my own, and I feel like that it can definitely help out my life, then I'll take that opinion. But if that opinion doesn't add any value to my life, maybe make me better, make me happy, then I just ball it off with a piece of paper.
Exactly. And I think that, like, the other thing is as well, and this is something that I feel like now as an adult, I can really be so grateful to my parents for. And it's that notion of being able to have an opinion, which sounds crazy, because a lot of the time, and this is something that I actually, you study, but it's a different experience when you're actually seeing it play out in real life. And that's something that, particularly in Polynesian culture, it's an offense to have a different opinion, particularly to a certain elder.
Yeah.
And so if you disagree with somebody respectfully, that's an offense.
Or you voice it respectfully.
Yeah, it's an offense. And so I find that I was really lucky growing up, because, and I guess this is why I'm a lawyer, but even when my opinion was different from my parents, I never felt that I couldn't say it. Mm-hmm. And they would discuss it with me, argue with me, and like I'm still sticking to my point of view, and I'm arguing with them, telling them why I think I'm right. And like most of the time, my dad's like, okay, whatever, I give up. But my mom, she would actually really listen to me and take into consideration what I was saying, even if it was completely different to what her point of view was. And that's something that I think is so important. That's something I really want to empower, particularly the younger generation, to have an opinion and voice it. There's nothing worse than having an internalized fire and then never letting it release. It's just burning inside of you, and it's eating you up because you can't ever, have a voice. And that's because most of the time they don't feel empowered to have to use their voice. Mm-hmm. They think, oh crap, like if I say this, it's going to offend the elders, it's going to offend this auntie, it's going to offend this church leader, it's going to offend this person, whoever. But the biggest offense is yourself. You're literally living an unhappy life, trying to please everybody around you. Mm-hmm. And probably most of the time you're not living a very productive life because it's not authentic to who and what you want to do. So yeah, that's something that I really am grateful for, actually, is being able to, have contentious discussions with my parents and them actually listening and encouraging me to having a different opinion. So when people this is the most manipulative thing that I've ever heard. So when like someone ever says to me, oh, your mom wouldn't agree with that. And I'm like, she probably wouldn't, yeah. Wouldn't agree with that. And that's fine, because I know that whatever I do for myself, my mom at the end of the day would agree with, or my dad would agree with, or whoever it is that loves me genuinely would agree with. And I think that that's really an important thing, is you shouldn't be molding yourself to be somebody else. It should always come from whatever the fire within you, like it sounds cliche, but whatever is within you, I think that that's what's going to reveal, anybody's true purpose. And you shouldn't be afraid of it. Nobody should be afraid of their purpose.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that I think that we should encourage for our younger generations.
Yeah, I definitely want to talk about this a little bit more, because I'm very interested in hearing your opinion about it. It's funny because that's one of the main topics and conversations that I have regarding not only people that are on my podcast, but constantly with my own friends, with my own family members, that we will have like, they'll reach out to me and voice their opinion to me. And I always tell them, why don't you tell your mom or dad? Why don't you tell me? I'm like, dude, I'm not your therapist, bro. But for some reason, I'm the family's licensed opinion therapist. For all their troubles, they come to me, venting to me. All right. But the one thing that I remember, I had this discussion with one of my friends, and because I believe that when you don't create an environment for children to voice their opinion, especially Polynesian kids, for me, it teaches them to allow things to happen to them, no matter good or bad. It teaches them to be submissive, not speak, subservient, not allowing, not taking action when something clearly, because I feel like that's one of the terrible things about the way we raise our kids that way. I mean, I do love the respect factor. Like, I do believe in that. I love how we respect our parents, right? But there has to be levels and, context of, we can't be just blindly just follow what our parents tell us, because not everybody you grew up with beautiful and loving parents, and I love that about you. But in the real world, every single parent has the good intentions for their children, or is a loving or supporting parent, because parents can be toxic, parents can be alcoholics, can be drug abusers, right?
Exactly.
And then if they're the way they treat their kids and what they feed their kids, if they tell them I'm always right, and then a lot of times what the kids see in their household, even if it's abusive or toxic or wrong, in their mind they think that's all right. And then when they go to the real world, and then bad things happen to them, and that cause them a lot of pain, in their mind they think that's normal. And then we were just talking about this whole discussion, like, especially when it comes not only in emotional level, but also on a professional level. Like, if you want to ask for a promotion, if you want to ask more money from your employer is manipulating, using you, and not paying you the right wages. If you're not used to talking, speaking up, and voicing your opinion, you're gonna allow those situations to keep happening. And this is something that we just talked about a lot. That's why a lot of Polynesians, we don't progress in our careers. We don't grow. We don't strive for a higher purpose or success or fulfillment in life, and we just stick to what we know, and because we're so afraid of challenging anything. And it's crazy how all those problems kind of originates from the house, and from a simple thing, just allowing our kids to voice their opinion on a healthy level. That can be a big difference when it comes to who they become, but also to their future. And that was something that I always talk about with my friends, like having discussion. And even I always tell, when are you going to get the guts to tell your parents? When are you going to have the confidence to tell your parents how you truly feel? And it's kind of sad that, and I was talking with this the other day with one of some elder Tongans. He said that it's so sad to see Polynesian kids, they wait till their parents pass away until finally having the courage to live their own life. And sadly, by the time their parents pass away, they're kind of older now. And then it's like, maybe it's too late now to do all the things that you really wanted to do, to be happy, to be fulfilled, and to live a better life. And then the cycle keeps repeating.
It's a sad reality, I think, of the culture, which I think is changing now. And I think particularly with social media as a platform, so many Tongans, Samoans have the ability to feel not only empowered and supported by their peers, but to also feel like they're being heard, because most of the time they don't actually feel like they can be heard in the home. But in saying that, it's not even just within, the limitations aren't just within the home. It's not, you can have the most supportive parents, and or probably you don't even have parents, or whatever the case may be. I think that the limitation exists just broader, in terms of the culture, church elders, certain family members, different roles, and it manifests itself in different ways in the way that you live out your life. And I think that having, as a lawyer, I have to challenge on a daily basis, the most highly regarded people, in our communities, judges and, other lawyers much more senior than me. And this is something that I spoke about with one of the talks that I facilitated, is that actually that ability to challenge and to even negotiate or to disagree with certain things, particularly when it's coming from the top down to you, that is something that I had to unlearn, was a bad thing, because even when I was going to school in Tonga, something that I found really odd was that you couldn't have like reciprocal conversations with your teacher where it was like a give and take situation, obviously where they learn from them. But students couldn't even say, funny jokes, or, like if the teacher wrote an apple or something, it would be like, it's like, well, why did you do that? That wasn't part of it. It was very one-sided. And I think that type of learning isn't healthy. And being able to encourage students, not just in the home, but especially at school, is something that I think that we all need to take on ourselves, to make sure that people feel not just empowered to speak about things that are different from what their elders or parents or whoever that believes in, but that they feel empowered and supported to actually have an opinion.
And for me, one thing I always hear from the older generations, right? They always complain about how their kids don't listen to them, or sometimes the later down in their life, their relationship they're not as close as they used to be before. And I remember I was talking to this one elder, and we were just having a conversation, and I was trying to bring to him to understand why those things happen. And I told him, look, if you grow up in an environment, right, where you don't feel like your voice is heard, and you feel like that everything you do is going to be criticized, and you can't be yourself, naturally over time, it's going to bring resentment, because it's going to bring resentment over time towards your own parents. And I hate to see that within my own community, when I see kids and daughters and the parents, they're fighting against one another, and their relationship is not as close. And sometimes some families, it breaks apart. But what happens is when somebody can't be themselves, and they're unhappy, no matter, and you can be the most loving person. You can, because I know to the elders, in their way of, okay, if I feed you, if I give you clothes, you live in the house, you're good. That's all you need. All right. What more do you want from me? I've done my job. And then always you ungrateful. I do all this for you, and you're still unhappy. And I try to bring a look. At the end of the day, we're human beings. We're not cattle. We're not sheep. Where you can just feed us, and we're human beings. We have feelings. So a kid can live in a home where everything's provided for them, but if they're not taken care of emotionally, where they feel their voice is heard, or you encourage them to actually do the things that they want to do, and they constantly live being somebody they're not, and that accumulates over time. It's gonna accumulate. It's gonna always lead to resentment. At the end of the day, then you're gonna end up resenting your own parents, and the relationship is going to fall apart. Like I always, and we talk, like just ask, like, you just have a conversation with your kids and find out who they are, find out what they want, what they need. But I do also understand that our parents, that's the conditioning and how they were raised, and that's how they were raised from their own parents. So they're just teaching us what they know of how they were raised. So it's not. I mean, for all those kids out there, because one thing I do see is, like, sometimes the kids blame their parents. For me, being, and I always tell them, look, no matter how tough you had it with your Polynesian parents, with your own parents. Our parents at the end of the day did the best they can of what they did and what they know. Sometimes that's all they know. The love they show you, the tough love. I know you, I know your parents was pretty cool, but the tough love that we grew up in, that's all they know. So just understand that, and just that's how your parents are. But then, like I said, but pretty much our responsibility as this generation is to create change and understand. And I loved how you said like voicing, able to voice your opinion and unlearn. And that's something I had to do for myself, because I realized at the end of the day, there's always a better way to do something in this world. No matter what whatever you've been taught, whatever your parents give you and provide for you, and the different opinions that you've learned as a child, I realized there's always a better way to do something. And for me, like I said, when I finally learned to like ask and learn, and that's when I was able to learn the new things. I was able to change the circumstances and also overcome the negative feelings I had from my own childhood, and realize that I can take the responsibility myself and grow. But if I didn't question the things and actually have the courage to speak up, then I wouldn't be who I am today. I wouldn't even be doing this podcast today with you.
Exactly, and I think that's probably the most important thing, is empowering kids to actually have an opinion. And when they do have an opinion, to not shun it down just because it's different from them. And that's at all levels. It's not just in the home, it's in schools, churches, workplaces, the community. It's probably one of the most important things.
Okay. I also want to I do want to talk about your relationship with your parents, because I want to reverse. And because I really believe, like, I love how your parents encourage, loved you unconditionally and let you be yourself, let you form your own personality. So I'm kind of interested to hear of how they raised you, because I feel like all the older generations are here, listen to this. They need to hear this part of it. But yeah, how was your relationship with your parents? What was their rules and their boundaries of how they raised you, and I'm just interested to learn and kind of reverse engineer of everything you went through, especially because I know everything starts at the end of the day as a child. Everything starts at home, and everything starts with our relationship with our parents, and that's how pretty much molds us to who we become. So, can you talk about? And I know, and can I ask you, is your parents like from Tonga? Well, you said one of them from London, and then one of them
in London. So my mom they're both Tongan.
Okay.
But my mom is half Tongan and half British.
Okay.
And my dad is also mixed. So but they both grew up in Tonga. My dad grew up in London his whole life. And then, like I said, he moved to Tonga when he was in his 20s. And my mom grew up in New Zealand for most of her life. And they both holidayed in Tonga, got married. Well, then she went to Miami. She was living there for a little bit, and then she went to London, followed my dad, and then they got married. But I always thought that, I guess I thought I had a very typical childhood, but clearly didn't. In terms of not just my upbringing, but I guess my relationship, having the ability to speak up and things. And that I say that because my friends used to find it really strange. Like when we go home for lunch or something, if my mom would say something, I'd be like, well, no, I don't agree, because, and I'll say why. And they'll be sitting there like, oh, she just disagreed. And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, I can't, they just used to find it so strange.
Yeah.
And the opposite of that was in New Zealand, where everybody had the freedom to have a different opinion from their parents.
Yeah.
And if anything, they felt that, I was a little bit conservative, because, if I'm like, Mom, can I go to a party? And she'd be like, no. Then I genuinely was like, okay, well, I don't want to go then. I wasn't one of those kids who's like, no, but I need to go to this party. And if she said no and she gave me her reason and I was like, okay, it makes sense, then I just wouldn't go. Whereas my friends in New Zealand would be like, no, Mom, you suck. Whatever it is.
It was a balagi kid.
And they would be arguing. And so it was I guess it was a different dynamic in both instances. But like I said, I had amazing parents. My mom was really loving. She genuinely put all of us. I have 2 older brothers and 1 younger sister, and she
Yeah.
really she put all of us, including my dad, before herself, to a fault. And that kind of unconditional love that you grew up with is something that, especially when I was younger, I took for granted, because I just always thought that was always going to be there. And it wasn't until I lost my mom in 2016 that I realized just how lucky I was in life to have such an amazing woman, not only as my mother, but as a role model. And my dad was just your typical, like my typical dad. You know, he worked a lot, he traveled, and he really instilled in us the power of education. And that was something that I also got from my dad's dad, so my grandpa. Both of them were really, they were never forceful, but it was clear to me at a young age that education was so important, not just because my grandpa and my dad said so, but because it allowed me to actually think and be critical and analytical for myself, and to actually be informed about what I'm speaking about. That's something that they always used to say, is like, don't just go and say something just to say it. Say it if you actually know it, otherwise keep quiet.
Yeah.
And so I think that the combination of both of them together just allowed us as kids to just really thrive. And I have an amazing relationship with my siblings as well. We all really support it. My brothers and I, like, we have, again, in Tonga, it was an anomaly, I guess, that, you know, we used to all like hang out, play with all my cousins, you know, watch TV, which I know was a strange thing, like you're not allowed to watch TV together and all that kind of stuff. But that just wasn't something that we grew up with, because I do find that when you actually unpick that notion, it's a very strange thing. But we all were really close, and like we could speak openly to each other about everything. I mean, even about our parents would speak to us about everything. Everything was really open. And like I said, then moving to New Zealand, everything was very strange in Tonga. And then in New Zealand, that's just kind of the norm. If anything, they thought that we were a little bit conservative in certain aspects. But yeah, I guess that was kind of just it, the unconditional love that I always had from my parents, and the support, and instilling in us from a really young age the power of education, and having your own informed opinion, not just following people because what they said is right, or, you know, if they're it doesn't matter who they are, like if it doesn't align with you, and if it doesn't sit well with you, then think about it twice, because you're the one who has to live with the action, not them. So that was kind of how I grew up. And yeah, I am really grateful to my parents, because they laid the foundation to everything that I wanted to do in life, which has been, yeah, I would say that has been a majority of the time given me the motivation to actually do what I want to do.
Yeah, I love what you said. 2 things that I want to bring up. But I love what you said, that, you know, you should always compare and make your own opinion, because you don't want it to live with your own action.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of my favorite quotes was like, I think I heard this in somebody's podcast, like, hey, you should always live your own life. Don't let other people make choices for your life, because at the end of the day, every choice has a benefit and a consequence. And if you allow people to make choice for your life, you have to live not only with the benefits, but then you also have to live with the consequences. If things go bad, they don't have to live with it. You do. All right. But yeah, I like the one thing I wanted to ask you about is, I know you said, you know, it's funny, I was laughing about it. You know, when your mom calls you, hey, I'm gonna go to this party, she just said no, and you're okay. And she gave you your reasoning.
Yeah.
So I remember I had this discussion with somebody, but how important it is to our kids is when you tell them something, like when our parents say, hey, no, don't do this. And I loved how your mom, not only she told you she disagreed with you, but she also told you her reasoning. And a lot of times, what I hear is, like, a lot of times in the Polynesian culture, they'll just tell us no, but they won't tell us the reason.
Exactly. Yeah,
and
100%.
But I want you to, you know, I want your thoughts on this. Why is it so important to a child for a parent to explain the reasoning, and not just totally just say no because I told you so, and this is how it is? So I want to ask you.
Well, I think that when you're growing up, the see, I know that some people don't have parents, but when you're
Yeah.
growing up and you're told not to do a specific thing or a particular thing, you have no opinion as to why you shouldn't be doing that. You genuinely don't. It's like, wait, why can't I go to this party? Everyone's going to be there. It's going to be fun. It's going to be this. It's going to be that. And until you hear the other side of the no, you're always going to be wondering why, without actually having any information about why that no even is placed on you. Because otherwise you're like, well, what's the point? You're constantly asking why. And so I think that it's important to give a reasoning so that people can make their own informed opinions about what they're doing. Even if it doesn't align with you, at least you can hear the perspective of a mother or a father or a family member and actually take into consideration how they feel. To me, respect isn't about fear. Respect is about understanding and having sympathy and compassion to how the other person feels. So like if my mom said to me, look, I don't want you to go to this party because I heard this person's going to be there and he's just come out of prison. I mean, this didn't happen, but like, let's just say like this person's just come out of prison and apparently he's supplying the alcohol and all this kind of stuff. And it's going to make me feel really sad actually if you go, because I'm going to be too worried about what could potentially happen. Well, then now I have to process, okay, well, my mom's going to be super sad and worried. And she has given me a reason as to why I shouldn't be there, is because there are people there who she doesn't probably want me to associate with good reason. And so I take that into consideration. I'm like, okay, well, then that's just it. I guess I was always told I was like a lot more mature for my age. So like, you know, it wasn't the same with my sister. She's like, no, I really want to go and whatever. But I think that for me, whenever I felt that my parents were uncomfortable with something, that was, unless it was something I was like, no, and then I'll tell them my reasoning and we'll come to some kind of solution. I think that it's important because it really informed me about what they were feeling, and that really influenced my ability to. Sorry, I can hear someone knocking at my door.
Go ahead. It's all right.
Sorry.
It's all right, guys. You got a special delivery.
Sorry, I was waiting for a package and it's finally arrived, so that's good.
Hey, I know that when you get that package, it's always a good feeling.
So yeah, what I was saying is that like when when you're actually informed about the reasoning for anything, especially if it's coming from a good place, if it's like if you're gonna have conflict with your parents growing up because you want to do something, and that's natural. Especially if if you're adamant, you definitely want to go to that party. But for me, when I knew how it made my mom feel, or how it made, if it made her really uncomfortable, then that was reason enough for me just to be like, okay, well, it's not, I guess that not that big of a deal to me to not go. So yeah, to answer your question, I think that when you are informed about why somebody has an opinion like that's different from yours, it helps you take into consideration what they're saying. And at least when you make your decision, you can understand where they're coming from.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. And also, I feel like for myself and my own personal experience, like, when if you take the time to explain to a kid why, the reason behind it, that can, that shows in my own experience, it shows that you care. Because sometimes when you're just like totally just say no and give no reasoning, that can come out really cold. and unempathetic, right? And especially how our, especially the way our Tongan parents say no. They say with, they say with fear, like you said, they speak it with fear. They give you that face.
Yeah.
And they give, they express it, kind of in a very angry manner sometimes when they say no. And a lot of times what I feel like is because, a lot of times because like I felt, because if a child just keeps, if you keep telling a child no, 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 and you say it out of fear, sometimes like you might feel like that your parents don't care. And then, what happens is, I mean, if you feel like your parents don't care, then you're going to do the opposite of what your parents tell you. And you don't care. Oh, well, my parents don't care about what I feel like, what I want to do for myself. Or if they don't care, I don't care. I'm gonna go do. I'm gonna keep doing. Especially if something that because when you're younger, you're not really, we're gonna make a lot of mistakes.
Yeah.
And
natural. I think that's
and that's natural. Yeah, that's natural. But sometimes I hear a lot of parents like I hear the parents talk about their kids. My kid keeps making a lot of mistakes, and they kind of like trash their kids, in the when they're gossiping.
Yeah. Right. Get together.
Yeah, but I was like, man, if you would, when I'm just listening, and then of course, and especially when they're talking about somebody I know personally, and then I've had my personal conversation with them, I was like, man, if you just took the time to tell them why. And just shows them some sincerity, some love, they wouldn't even consider the other option. But like you said, because you heard that from your mom's side, you love your parent, you love your mom, and you don't want to, she told you the reason behind it, it's gonna upset her. You cared for that, and so okay, no problem, I won't go.
Yeah, right? And it wasn't like that though. I'd be like, no, I know that I need to do this, and she would hear me out. And that there was never a time where I ever felt like I needed to go behind any of their backs because I was really open and honest about everything.
Yeah.
It's just it's a two-way street. I will hear them out and they will hear me out, and I think that that's the important aspect of any relationship, even outside of your parents.
It's communication, right? It's to be able to communicate, and I feel like that when you just say no at all, and there's like as children, you feel like there's no communication, and then a lot of times when you don't feel like your partner is communicating in a relationship, you feel like you feel all alone. You feel like they don't care. All right.
Yeah, you're left in the dark.
Like, you're left in the dark. Yeah, exactly. And then when you're left in the dark, then you end up going to the dark place. The dark place, exactly. a lot of lights.
Yeah.
Music, lights and music. If you guys know what I'm talking, that was a joke.
Good music.
With the DJ. All right. So yes, that was good. So I kind of want to transition back to your story. So can you talk about your journey, especially working on your career, especially becoming a lawyer, and just talk about the overall journey itself, because I do know, like, and you said it yourself, a lot of people thought may have disagreed with you even being a lawyer as a Tongan woman. All right. Even though that's beautiful and that's very empowering, and to see somebody achieves that type of level of success, but there's always those people in the culture that that might disagree with that because you're being different, and that's something I realized in our culture. Like you say, we don't like change, and we're very stubborn. We like to stick to what we know. So anybody that challenges that belief, that system that everybody's living, they're always seen as an outsider, or always, sometimes they call it like fear mea. This is all the girl. She want to be all that.
What's interesting about that saying is I really find that saying is interesting. I had a conversation actually about this, because it's like when people say that to other people, and I hear it, I'm like, well, what's wrong if she wants to be somebody, or he wants to be somebody?
Oh my God.
Why is that a bad thing?
Say it louder to those in the back.
When like someone will be like, oh yeah, he walked in and for example, if I know if this guy absolutely hates, his auntie or whoever it is because she's been a horrible person or whatever, whatever the case may be, and he's walked in confidently and he's gone to meet all the people that he genuinely loves and cares about, whatever. And then, he goes and sits down. And then people are like, oh, he's Fiamet, didn't even go and say hi. And I'm like, well, he's staking his ground because actually, that woman's probably mistreated his mom and dad. They don't know the history. And I genuinely don't think that there's anything wrong with that. So
Yeah.
Particularly if they're trying to do something, it's like, oh yeah, he's trying to be a pilot. She's trying to do this, that. Fiamet. And I'm like, am I the only one who's getting anything wrong? Why is it a bad thing? It's not bad to want to elevate yourself.
Exactly.
It's a good thing.
Yeah. So yeah, I wanna talk about that right now because that's something that's common, and I'm just interested to hear that portion of your life, especially for everybody that's listening. So can you talk about your journey? What inspired you, by the way, to be a lawyer? I do want to hear that as well. So what inspired to be a lawyer? The process, the journey, the work, and and all the experiences, not only on the outside world but also culturally that you heard, and then what you had to persevere through to make it and be a lawyer. So yeah, you can talk about that. Yeah.
So when I was at school, I naturally gravitated towards mooting and debating. And I found that was really interesting. And I think that again, comes from just my upbringing and being able to speak and be critical and analytical in the family. And this is outside of my parents, but even with my auntie, my dad's oldest full-blooded sister, Susan, was probably she's one of the closest aunties to me. On my dad's side, and sadly she's passed, but she actually studied law herself. And so growing up, she would always have conversations with me about what was going on in the world. And, back then, especially when I was like 9 or 8 years old, I didn't find it really that strange or odd until now that I look back at it. I'm like, wow, we spoke about some pretty deep stuff when I was a kid. And she kind of naturally just honed that ability for us to just speak honestly and openly and critically. And we actually differed a lot in how we viewed things. And what was beautiful was that we both had the respect for each other. And I mean, again, she has the respect for me as someone who's super young, but particularly as my dad's older sister, for me to actually have that opinion. So yeah, I just having that kind of relationship in my family, I naturally felt like I always wanted to learn two sides of every story, especially because I hated hearing one side of thing and then that person's completely trashed, has no ability to speak for themselves. And it used to really bother me because I'm like, well, we've only heard one side of the story. I don't care how close we are. If it's only one side of the story, it's incomplete, and we can't draw a conclusion from something that's incomplete. And so I was naturally really interested in getting as much knowledge as I possibly could. I was a typical nerd, to be fair, when I was at school. And so I constantly was like studying, learning, and got into mooting and debating super young when I was a kid. And then my older brother, actually, he started studying law as well in Australia. And he and I love to debate. That's kind of our thing. We love to debate. And like, again, that was something that I didn't even realize was honing me as well. He was far more progressive than I was with his views on not just the culture and our family, but even with women and men and the way that relationships were kind of built in Tonga. He was way more progressive, and at the time I was too young to kind of understand because I was so ingrained in particular notions that I thought to be true. And it wasn't until I started growing up and realizing, well, actually, I don't agree with that at all. I don't agree with this aspect. I don't give a damn who says it. I just do not agree. And so after that, I got super interested in the criminal justice system when I was at school. And I went on a Europe trip, actually. And I was really fortunate to have gone to the Auschwitz concentration camp.
Okay.
And so while I was there, you actually can't help but feel completely heartbroken about the concentration camp that had taken place. But it really influenced my ability to see how so much injustice can go on in the world and actually be justified if you've got the wrong leader in charge. So for example, back in World War II, when Germany was under the influence of Hitler. When you think about it, a lot of the things, and this is an argument that was actually taken in court, a lot of the things that the people were doing, the Germans were doing to the Jewish people at the time was legal. And that's why it's so important to have an opinion and to actually be analytical, because you can be told the complete wrong thing to do, and it would be illegal for you not to do the opposite, to do the opposite thing. Anyways, going to that camp really changed my life a lot. And after that, we had career days at school. Naturally, went to the law booth and spoke to. We had lecturers come in, and different tutors and law students at the time you get to speak to. And then just kind of from that, didn't know that I wanted to be a lawyer so much, but I knew that I wanted to learn about the legal system.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very competitive just generally, but in New Zealand, there's like over 1,000 kids who make it into first year. And then that gets cut to 200, or is it 300 students in the second year. So you have to maintain a specific, a particular GPA to make it to the next year.
Yeah.
So I just thought, challenge accepted. I'm going to do it. And luckily for me, it worked out, and I really enjoyed learning about the law and it challenging my own belief systems, and I guess honing my ability to actually articulate what I had to say clearer. Like when I had an argument to say, I could say it much more clearer.
Yeah.
And so, pretty much in law school, I went through it. It was really difficult. Like, it's not an easy thing to do. It wasn't all like rainbows and sunshine. Yay, I did law, now I'm a lawyer. That's not how it is at all. Like
the movies.
It's not nothing like that. But it's not. But it's, my mom was sick throughout my penultimate year, and this is something that actually probably drew me a lot closer to the culture, because I realized that there were a lot of kids who were less fortunate than me at school, at university, going through similar circumstances, and were still able to thrive and do well, and have a smile on their face, joke around, and all that kind of stuff. And that actually gave me a lot of hope that I could do it. If they can do it, then I can do it.
Mm-hmm.
And the genuine support that I received as well. And so dealing with my mom's illness throughout my penultimate year of law school, that was really difficult for me. Not for any other reason than we felt helpless to her pain, and that was something that broke all of our hearts. But like the saying goes, the way that you can show respect and love to the people that you love most is to do well for yourself. Yeah. And so I couldn't use my mom's illness as an excuse as to not to do well. Like, I was even encouraged to take a semester break, and I thought, well, that's stupid. Why would I do that? Because then my mom's going to feel like her illness has impacted my ability to study, and I'm just not going to let it have that effect on me. I'm going to, if anything, it's going to influence, like, it's going to make me want to finish it faster so she can definitely be at my graduation, which is what I did. And pretty much after that, I graduated. And then I knew after I had 6 months of just traveling, when I came back, I wanted to do my master's in international law, and that I wanted to get experience in litigation. And that's kind of how, I guess, my legal career started.
Man, that's beautiful. And I remember, I love what you shared, like how, because I know that's something that I was listening, and then I know that happens a lot, is you finishing all the way through despite what your mom was going through. And one thing I've had my own discussions with a lot of Polynesian kids, like, and I'm not saying this to say this is how it's been done. Like, you made your own choice of what you for your own life, and this is your life, and that's why you are who you are today. But I've seen it, but there's so many times I've seen where, somebody's working towards a goal, a child working towards the college or graduating or towards something, and then something happens, right, with the parents, and their parents tell them, hey, go. Their parents are like, look, go finish your school. And I remember I had a conversation with somebody that they told me, like, they didn't want to be seen as like like that offer that if she goes finish her school, even though her own parent told her to go finish, she just didn't want to be viewed as that from the culture, from everybody, that, oh, if I leave my mom and keep doing what I'm doing to finish my degree or whatever, I just don't want to be known as that. I was like, and I'm just having this conversation. Look, your mom told you like everything's good. Like your parents told you. Why are you worse than what everybody else thinks? And it was just funny. I just had, when you were sharing that, I just had that flashback with that one friend, and it was sad to see that not only like she didn't finish, but just did so many things that ended up happening, and she wasn't even able to complete it, even though they were so close.
It really, like, that's why it is so important to have a filter on with what is important to allow into your space and just rubbish and trash in the world. And that sounds terrible, but it's true, because especially if you're going to be living life with regret for not having done something because of what somebody else had thought, I think that in itself is allowing other people to have a power over you. I mean, even like I said, I'm very lucky I have very supportive and loving parents, but even if they didn't support my law school journey, I would still do it. It's what I have to do for myself that I know will not only benefit myself, but will benefit them and benefit the people around me. And hopefully I can give that back into the community. You have to really have a strong filter of what you allow into your energy, because I mean, like, when you're going through law school, people, when you plant a seed, the tree doesn't grow overnight. That's not what happens. But when you're going through law school and you're explaining to people, I want to be a lawyer someday, at some point, when it's 5 years, so it's not it's a long time of an investment. And so at some point you're told, just give up. Like, what's the point of all of this anyway? And if you listen to that, then we're never going to have any Polynesian lawyers. We're never going to have any Polynesian female lawyers. We're not going to have any Polynesian female judges. We're not going to have community makers, policy makers, and all these, whatever. There are lawyers who are actresses now and acting and do different things, and whatever the case may be. But the point is that when you're doing something for yourself and you know that it's authentically true to your calling, regardless about what anybody says, you really need to answer that calling. Otherwise, it's lost, and it doesn't stay there forever. That's the thing. It doesn't stay there forever. You either take that opportunity while it's there, or it's lost. And it's a shame if it's lost, because then you have to try and figure out your new purpose in life.
And you said it. Not only you have the opportunity, but we should encourage anybody that wants to be a lawyer, because like we want to be represented in the government. We want to be, what I'm saying? Like, sometimes I see a lot of people complain about how there's nobody in the government that can represent us, that understands our struggle. Well, there were a lot of kids that wanted to do that, but you kind of shamed them.
Got in the way.
And now we don't have any representation. Like, we have to encourage people to become lawyers and doctors, so we have representation of people in places in society that make big decisions that determine the cultural and the aspects of our world, but not only have leaders in our society, but they have leaders that understand us as people. And you see all cultures. There's representation in the Chinese community, the Latino community, every community, but there's not a lot for us. But we have to encourage our kids to strive to that level and not like belittle and shame them and think they're female.
Like that's it. You have to be somebody. There's nothing wrong with wanting to be somebody. It's not, for me, when other people say that about somebody when they're trying to be somebody, I genuinely get baffled by it. I'm like, I really just don't get it. And then they're like, oh, that's because you're hafakasi and you don't get it. And I'm like, well, no, I'm Tongan, and I still don't get it. I really just don't get it. But I think that in saying that, particularly with law, there's an overrepresentation of Pacific people in the criminal justice system, who need representation and who need people who can speak to their stories and actually understand what they're talking about culturally. And there was one time that I had gone to a talk, and they were saying how one of the judges, they took so much offense because he was talking and trying to help this defendant, and he had his head down the whole time and wasn't looking at the judge, which obviously is a sign of disrespect in Western culture.
Yeah.
But in Tongan, Samoan, and Polynesian culture, that's a sign of respect, is to be looking down and not, you're kind of making yourself lesser than so that they can speak over you and tell you what to do. And so then the judge got angry and was like, well, why aren't you looking at me while I'm speaking to you? And thank God, the lawyer, who was a Pacific lawyer, was able to stand up and go, well, Your Honor, he is, got to speak to his cultural background and explain that that's actually a sign of respect. And it offered a different perspective to the courtroom, which is something that couldn't have been given unless it was somebody who understood and took the time to actually know what they're talking about in terms of the culture. So I think that, my experience in the law, we need 100% more Pacific lawyers out there, but especially to give that new perspective. And it's even better now. We've got, Pacific judges on the bench, female judges on the bench, and it's incredible to hear them say to defendants that they can relate to particular parts of their, their upbringing, their culture, whatever it is. Because then suddenly you realize we're all not that different from each other. We've just made different choices. Mm-hmm. And it's a beautiful thing, actually, because then you think to yourself, we have somebody there who actually understands this and can actually make the right decision based on everything that they know and their experience as a Polynesian and whatever the case may be. But it's, that's something that I think that is really, really important.
Yeah, and I love what you said. Like, we're all different, but we just make different choices.
Yeah,
and then that's why whenever I see, like, I support you. When I ran into your page and saw what you were doing, like, I really for me, when I see Polynesians striving for success and striving for a better life, I mean, that motivates me, because if I see you doing it, I know if it's possible for you, that means it's possible for me, because I hate how in society and culture we have this stereotype that we can only succeed in sports, we can only succeed in rugby.
Oh, sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I used to be a victim of that. I remember growing up, my goal was like to make it to the NFL, and then when I realized that goal wasn't happening, I fell into a sort of deep depression. But because I had this narrative and this like limited belief that the only thing I could do with my life was play sports, and I grew up that way, just thinking I'm only valuable to society as an athlete. There's nothing more I could offer. And that's why I love having you on my podcast, but that's why I love your stories, just because I just want to let everybody know that if you're watching this, it's possible. You can do anything anything is possible in your life if you believe in it, if you work for it, and not allow any kind of negativity, especially those people that want to call you female. And it's funny, whenever I hear that, when people say, like, whenever I heard that, like, when people say, oh, if you're female, I always laugh to it, because I always want to say, oh, so you want me? You're blaming me or criticizing me for trying to be somebody. Who do you want me to be? Like you?
Yeah.
So are you the standard? Are you what I aspire to be?
Exactly. I genuinely do not get how that's an offensive thing, and I hear it. I think every Tongan at one stage, if they've done something a little bit different, they've been called that. And it's such an interesting concept to me, because when you actually like translate it, it's like, so they want to be somebody. Elevate yourself. Don't let particular notions of who you should be stop you from being what you want to be. But even if it's going against the status quo, like I said, culture is constantly changing, and you're part of the change. And so if you're going to be called that, oh, well, okay, move on. There's a lot worse things in the world.
And this is a fact of, this is my truth, but I don't know, it's probably different. I don't know what about your experience, but every single person that's ever called me female, when I looked at their life, they weren't really doing much.
Yeah, exactly.
It's always funny. It's like, okay, so you don't want. Yeah, so I can't get offended. Or I was like, oh, actually, thank you for telling me I'm doing something in my life, because I don't want to be here. I don't want to live your life.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so I'm just interested to hear what was like. I mean, when you were working towards your goals, like what was the biggest like, if there is any like biggest criticism or any negative that you heard, or that you heard that from based from other people, and just I'm just interested to hear if there was any.
Not so much in terms of law school.
Okay.
Or like, I'll often get the odd comment disguised as a joke about how, I shouldn't be a lawyer and, I should try and work on the home, be more domesticated, all that kind of rubbish. Which again, like, I have the humor. I can like laugh along with it. It's kind of irrelevant talk, but I think mostly in terms of modeling, there were definitely a lot of naysayers that I guess try to impose their belief on what you can and can't be, particularly if you're an academic, if you're a lawyer, well, then you can't really be a model. You can't be in an industry that's predominantly focused on, in a way, a lot of self-promotion, because, you are the brand. And so I think that even more than that, being so, I guess, external with the way that you are presenting yourself and the things that you're doing, it's kind of, you're kind of, it's very vain if you don't understand what that person is trying to do. And that's something that a lot of, people in the culture don't really understand. The younger generation completely get it. But it's, if you're from the older generation, it's like, oh, she's so fearless. She's so, she's just so vain. And so I think that was probably a difficult thing to overcome. But again, it's like, focus on what you're going to allow in your energy. I told this story once, and everyone found it really funny. At the time, I didn't know why it was so funny, but now I can laugh at it. And I remember there was this one. So for a long time, when I got into modeling, it was a complete accident. I was literally buying food with my mom and my sister at Countdown, which is like a grocery store here in New Zealand. And there was this lady who was there at the checkout counter. I was outside waiting for them, and she was at the checkout, and she kept looking at me, and I was thinking, is she looking at me? Or like, I was like looking around like, this is really weird. Why is she looking at me? And then finally she like walks up to me, and I'm thinking, oh my God, like she's gonna talk to me. Like, this is so weird. And I was like, I want to say I was like 20 or something at the time. But she came up to me and she was like, look, this is going to sound really weird and completely random, but I think that you should get into plus size modeling. And so she gave me a bunch of numbers and a whole bunch of agencies, and was like, get in contact with them. So my mom came, she's like, what was this about? Like, what happened? And I told her, and she was like, oh, it's a scam. Like, it's all a scam. Like, don't ever trust people and all this kind of stuff. And anyways, we ended up searching the people that she had given me, and they were like legit people. Reached out and finally, got an agent, and then have kind of been doing it ever since then. And for the longest time, I mean, even now, I don't really consider myself to be a model. It's just that I sometimes do modeling. And it's because a lot of the time there is a certain way of how you present yourself. And like, again, with modeling, you have really no choice of what you get to wear. I mean, obviously, once you're at a certain level, you get to choose and do whatever. You're the creative director, whatever. But you don't really get to choose what you want to wear. And it's that notion of having to, I guess, be authentic to not just yourself in the industry, but, being able to represent the brand, actually saying no to brands that don't align with you, and not worrying about what other people can say, especially if it's like, if the dress is a short dress, I'm like, well, I love the dress. It's a beautiful dress. I'm going to not wear it and model it just because it's conflicts with somebody's conservative view of it. And so I think that in terms of my modeling career, that was probably something that I really struggled with, was dealing with other people's opinions on what I should and shouldn't be doing.
So I wanted to ask you, because I know you're a lawyer, and I know you're going to modeling. I want to because it's funny, I heard this from somebody, but because I know, is it hard to juggle both careers? Because because I want to ask you, because do sometimes like the lawyer community do, because sometimes if they see you modeling, they might not take you serious as a lawyer. All right. Did you ever experience that where there was a conflict of interest for both? It's like, from especially when you decided you want to be a successful lawyer, but you also love to model as well, and that's beautiful. Whatever you want to do for your life. But did you face that challenge of people from the lawyer, from your the community, from your justice community that didn't agree for you of going over to that side of a career?
They probably like no one really knows. Like
oh no, okay.
No one really
okay.
knows of like the legal community because, like I said, like, I'm 100% a different person in the courtroom than I am outside of the courtroom. And I mean, like, not just in the way that I am, but just aesthetically, I literally look like a completely different person. But nobody's ever spoken to me about it. A few of my friends who are lawyers obviously know that I do both, and they're so supportive. And I think that even if there was that judgment of, well, she can't do both, it's a judgment based on superficiality in the sense that you can't judge somebody for doing something because of the way that they look. So what I mean to say is, I'm a lawyer and my work speaks for itself. That's kind of just really it. Just because I look a certain way or do other things outside of the law, unless it's something that's completely like wrong or bad, it really shouldn't influence my ability to be a lawyer, and it doesn't. And I think that, like, going back to your question, is it hard to juggle both? Yes, it's really, really difficult to do both. Like, there are times where I literally, like, this is actually the first holiday that I've had this entire year. And like throughout the pandemic, I was working. The legal service was an essential service, which I'm blessed to have been able to work. But it is very difficult to work through a pandemic and, be switched on and being a lawyer and all that kind of stuff. And that's why I find it so beautiful that I get to do both, because on the other side, modeling is very light and it's very fun and it's very it in some ways glamorous, but in most ways it's very demanding as well in its own right. And having to reconcile my schedule for both sometimes has been impossible. There's been a lot, and to say that if it's irreconcilable in the sense that I have to choose between law or modeling, obviously law will come first. That is my passion. But there are a lot of times where I've actually had to say no to a lot of modeling work because it just conflicted with my my legal schedule, and that really sucked. It really sucked because I really do want to do both. So if there were any judgment on whether or not being a model, I guess, dilutes my ability to do my job as a lawyer, well, my work really does speak for itself. And unless it gets to the point where my schedule for modeling is so strong, like so overwhelming, that it actually is impacting my legal career, then I think in that instance, I'd be like, okay, well, I need to obviously give up one because I'm not able to give 110% to both. And so, I think that's a really good question, because that is something that I do get asked a lot.
Okay. And, I also want to ask you this because, one thing I do know is a lot of women look up to you, especially you're being a model and being not only for women in general, but for Polynesian women. And especially from, based on my conversation with a lot of women, they suffer with their body image, right? With their confidence in themselves. Because Polynesians, we're born a little different. We got that warrior blood, the warrior body, right? So I want to ask you is, did you ever, obviously I see you and you're confident, you love you love yourself and you love your body, and you go out there and be unapologetic when it comes to just showing who you are. And I love that. I'm sure a lot of women probably reach out to you in your circle of people that probably talk to you, hey, I love what you're doing. But did you ever face that growing up, being not loving your body because you're because of how you look compared to everybody else, being a Polynesian woman? And I just want to ask you about your own journey with your own self-love and self-confidence and building your own self-esteem and confidence in yourself. I definitely want to listen and hear that, because for everybody, for all the women that's watching right now, I just want to get that story, that part of your story.
100%. I used to be 135 kilos when I was at school, which is huge. And I think that,
for all the Americans that's listening to this, 135 kilos is 260 pounds. To give them, I don't want to give them some perspective.
Okay. So I used to be really obesely overweight, to the point where it was actually impacting my ability to do things. It's like, especially with like physical education, so PE classes at school in New Zealand, like I would be way too insecure to like do the rock climbing, for example, because I was like, well, if I go down, the person who's supposed to be my anchor is going to come up. So it really impacted the way that I looked at myself, the way that I felt, and I really genuinely felt so insecure to the point where like it manifests itself inside of you, where like you just don't even try anymore because you just actually think you're not worth it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that my relationship with food growing up, it wasn't something that I ever really looked at as like health and medicine and nutrition. I never looked at food that way. I always, especially because, Polynesians, like they love their food, they love all of that kind of stuff, cakes. And that was kind of the environment that I grew up in. It was, you just ate whatever you wanted when you felt like it. It wasn't like wait, I can't be having pizza at night anymore. So much. So it's like, growing up, I used to have a really unhealthy relationship with food, which in turn made me have a really unhealthy relationship with my body. And I used to really, really hate the way that I looked. To the point, like I said, I just stopped even trying. And I felt so depressed that I couldn't get myself out of something that I felt helpless to, but only I could help myself with it, which is really, it's like this conflict in yourself. It's like only you can help yourself, but how do you help yourself when you don't even know how, or you don't even feel like you're worthy of it? And so I changed my lifestyle in school, and it helped a lot that I was in boarding school, because I got to see, oh, so this is like a proper balanced meal and all this kind of stuff. Like, this is like, you guys have like 10 plates after the first, and you're like, what? And so being able to see that and actually see food as nutrition and something that needs to be balanced in your life. It's not all cakes and sweets and everything like that. You're never going to feel good that way. For a moment, probably yes, but long term, no. I think that going from that and then slowly coming into veganism, which I went plant-based 6 years ago, it really helped influence the way that I saw myself. Like, it was a more holistic thing. So I started to appreciate my body more, because the 135 kilo body that I had was the only body that could get me to what I wanted today. And like respect to what I had to go through and do, and like, the cravings that I had to overcome. It's like going cold turkey after, like, it's an addiction. And going through all of that, I slowly learned to actually not just love the fact that my body was doing all these things, but that was keeping me alive. Your body has more purpose than the way that it looks. It's not just the way that it looks. It's literally keeping you alive so that you can continue on your life and live out the purpose that you're supposed to be living in this world. And so basically stemmed from there. And I think that modeling has also helped a lot, actually, because it empowered me, because I'm in the plus size category, but it empowered me a lot to feel confident that this is something that I should feel proud of, and that I'm healthy. Like, I eat super healthy. I may not look like, a size 8 girl who eats only food, but like I go to the gym 5 times a week, sometimes 6 times a week. I spin, I love boxing, and I eat really good. I eat mostly plant-based foods. I'll have like the odd chocolate, like vegan chocolate, and like the odd faux meat and all that kind of stuff. But really, I think that once I built that relationship with food, it helped me recognize that that my body, there's only one body, and it has more of a purpose than the way that it looks. In fact, the way that you look is actually completely irrelevant to what your body is meant to do.
Yeah.
So as long as you're feeding and sending good nutrition to your mind, your body, it really does infiltrate your soul and allows you to be more confident in not just the way that you exhibit yourself, but in the way that you hold yourself and feel about yourself. But yeah, I totally relate to that. It's a hard journey to go through as a woman when there's just like so many different influences on telling you how to look and how to be, and being Polynesian, being bigger. It's beautiful and definitely something that's gaining more traction now. But I think that as long as you're doing, you're healthy and you're trying to be the best version of yourself every day, and you know that you're trying to be the best version of yourself every day, that's really all that matters.
Yeah. And you said it the best where like, because, we only have one body, and I know one of the best examples I heard from somebody was like, we only get one vehicle in life to travel in. There's, there is no renting a car. There is no, switching vehicles. Like, this one body that you have, this one vehicle that you have, this is what you're going to use for your journey. And depending on what kind of vehicle that you have, it will depend on your level of fulfillment, happiness you're going to have. And life is long. So like, and that's something that I always want to encourage the Polynesian kids, like, aspire to be healthy. It's not about like being like everybody else, looking like everybody else. Just be your own, like you said, the greatest version of yourself, but the healthiest version of yourself. Because I feel like, once you become healthy, it gives you confidence within yourself that you can do more for your life.
Exactly. And you feel better. Like, you feel better when you're putting good food into your body. And I mean, obviously, like, I'm not perfect. I love pizza. I eat pizza way too often. I love vegan junk food, all of that. But it's again, it's a balance. It's not just all salads and especially as a vegan, like, people are like, do you just eat salads? And I'm like, definitely not. In fact, they get really surprised with what I eat. And I think that once you build that relationship with food, you naturally get a more understanding of what your body is capable of and what you're putting it through on a daily basis, by not just what you're feeding it up here, what you're saying to yourself, but what you're like literally feeding your body is what's going to help you get through the day.
Yeah, and also like you said, like, because I think it was like 2015 or 2016. I remember I let myself go. I just let myself go. I went up, I ballooned up to like 300 pounds. Oh man, that was I enjoyed every part of that process, eating that. But I just realized when I was like 300 pounds, like I wasn't like I've always felt like a days ago. I didn't have energy. Didn't feel motivated. I hated looking at myself in the mirror, and then and a lot of people don't realize like your physical aspect of how you of your body ties into a lot of your mental state. If you feel unhealthy, most of the time you're gonna have like negative, unhealthy thoughts about yourself. And then once I realized that, once I realized I didn't feel good about myself, I decided to make a change and got healthy. And then once I felt more healthier, then I noticed my mindset started to be more healthier as well.
Yeah.
And it's like that's why I always tell one of my friends, look, just be healthy with your body. It's not even about your body more as your mentality that's going to improve. Because once you're in a happy place, mental happy place mentally, then you like that's when the possibilities as far as what you want to do for your life become unlimited, and then you just have the energy and the strength now to go pursue what you want to pursue. But it's hard to pursue what you want to pursue when you can't move out the couch. But I want to ask you, what do you, have people reach out to you? What do they say? Like, especially the people that you do reach out to, and especially when you are a model and inspiring a lot of people. I'm just interested to hear what people ask you about or what they say.
I think the number one thing that they probably ask is how did I get into law school? Like, it surprised me as well, because I didn't realize that so many of my followers want to be lawyers, which is amazing. All of them are girls as well who have messaged me. but that's probably the number one thing is how did I get into law school? Tips on what I did to get into law school. Aside from that, I would say that, yeah, modeling is a huge one, but it's never, it's like girls' parents, which is really funny. Like my daughter really wants to be a model and she really looks up to you and blah, blah, blah. And how did you do it? And I'm like, wow, that is so cool. And yeah, then I'll message them and I'll just tell them what I did and whatever I can help them with, I'll let them know. And just making sure that they, because there's a lot of kids who get taken advantage of in this industry, especially if they don't have, if they want to be a model full time and they don't have like another job or anything like that, that's an easy situation for a lot of young people to get taken advantage of. Particularly, this industry, it really is a harsh industry. It's not something that, it's not something that I would necessarily encourage, but if that's something that people want to pursue, I think 100% do it, as long as they're informed about what it's really like out there. And, I've gone to castings and it's funny is because you often hear about how models go to castings and they're told they're too fat. And everyone's like, that's the worst thing that they could say, body shaming, bloody blah. And I've gone to castings and I felt just as bad because the casting directors told me that I'm too small. Which is like, it's like the odd thing to think, how is that an offensive thing? But it's offensive because it's like, well, what body is considered ever good enough? You're either too small or you're too big. You're never going to be enough of yourself. And that's kind of the thought process that I go through whenever that comes up. But, I'm over it now. You learn to get a thick skin about it. I've kind of digress from the question, but that's probably the two number one things that I often get asked. They'll often ask me about like my thoughts on the culture, and sometimes I'll answer it. I kind of see it clear. I'm trying to really speak on those topics, just because it is a contentious topic and it's just far too broad to just write out in the Instagram DM. So yeah, I do get a lot of those questions as well.
Yeah, hopefully those questions about the culture we can answer in this podcast. So that way, if somebody DMs you, just go do this podcast right here. Just go watch that, and now answer all your questions instead of you have to type it like a long paragraph. So I do want to. I know you talked about a little bit, but veganism, right? I know that's one of the main topics that you wanted to spend some time on. I know a lot of. What is like the misconceptions? Because I have a friend that's vegan, right? So like, there's always like the misconceptions about veganism, where like especially, I've actually tried being a vegan. I've actually tried it. I did it for a month. All right.
Oh, wow,
and
pretty good.
Yeah. And for me, because like I was like, for me, I always like to try new things. Like I'm the type of person. Okay, let me try it out, see for my own opinion. I know a lot of people don't like being vegans, but I want to find out for myself before I place my own opinion. So I tried it for a month, and to be honest, I'm not gonna lie. If everybody watching, I felt the most active and the most energetic I've ever been in my life, being a vegan. I just felt a different type of energy level, a type of clarity as far as my mental focus. Like I just felt more healthy, a lot more focused, and more energy being a vegan for that 1 month. And I know I had my own misconception about being a vegan because I felt like, okay, I'm gonna lose muscle mass. I won't be able to fully work out because I like to work out every single day, and I won't be able to have the energy to work out in the gym. Than I would get from eating meat. But I was surprised that I had not only had the energy, but I felt more. I would actually recovered faster, and I was more able to had more energy working out, and I didn't feel like I had to rely on supplements. And sometimes we take pre-workout to get you focused, but when I was being a vegan, I didn't have to take that because I felt like I was just naturally relying on my natural energy. So, but unfortunately, I love the Tongan food. I just can't deny the Tongan food. I just love that Tongan food, man. It's stuck in my DNA. So I just had to go back to eating meat. But at least I tried the other side. But so yeah, so I want to ask you in your own experience. I want Polynesians that are watching this. I want them to be educated and hear the other side of what being vegan is, because that may inspire somebody that's watching this. So, how was like being a vegan? What's your when you first started? What was your like doubt or like misconception you felt like about being a vegan, because you grew up being a Tongan, eating everything you want, and then and just talk and just anybody and give more details about it, so that way we can just kind of give more content to people that's watching it that want to learn more about it.
Yeah, my biggest misconception about being vegan is probably that I literally could only eat salads. And
Yeah.
and that and like clearly, people always like, but you're vegan, why are you fat? And I genuinely don't take offense to that, because I'm like, that's true. I had that misconception as well. I
Yeah.
always thought vegans were like fixed. But the reality is that veganism is just everything that you can ordinarily eat, but just plant-based. It
Yeah.
really goes back to going to the way that we used to live. And a lot of the Tongan food that I love the most, I actually started loving as a vegan because I had a new palate for it. So like with Lu, I
Yep.
love Lu. It's one of my favorite meals to eat, with especially with like talo and kumala, like
Yep.
with coconut cream and all of that. And I still eat all of that food, except I just have it plant-based. I just get more creative with the vegetables. And like this Samoan balusami that's
Yep.
with tomato and onions. You can like there's so many more creations that you can do with particular foods that I think that a lot of people kind of miss because they are so focused on just having it with meat. But it's not easy. It's not something that's easy. And I think that for me in particular, when I first went vegan, it was predominantly just for weight loss reasons. It was like literally no other reason other than weight loss. I'd educated myself on the ethics of it. And you kind of feel for a moment really sad about what goes on in animal farming and just the animal agriculture, that the production behind it. You feel sad for a moment, but you quickly forget once you get hungry. And I think that for me, drawing the connection between not just the environment, the ethics, but particularly for your health, it makes the conscious choice a lot easier for me when it comes to what I put into my body now. And it's so much more difficult because when I first went vegan, there was like no options. Whereas like now, you can get vegan seafood, and you can get vegan everything. You can get vegan pork, you can get vegan everything. And a lot of people always say, well, if you are going to eat vegan seafood, vegan pork, blah, 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 well, why don't you just eat the real thing? And it's because I've drawn that ethical connection now where I don't want to harm other animals or, be involved in that process. So it truly, for me, it's like, why, if I want to eat my cake and have it too, then why can't I? I didn't grow up vegan. I used to love steak. I used to love all of that. And if I can have it, but just without any of the harm that goes behind it, then why not? It doesn't harm you if I'm vegan. And so it amazes me now the options that we have now, and I think that that's actually something that I'm really passionate about, because so many people want to go vegan, especially in the Polynesian community. It's like you don't have to go full blown vegan. You can just introduce various plant-based foods into your lifestyle, whether it's like through balusami or having more crops in your meals, or just more vegetables and having it replace one meal. I think that would be quite amazing, actually, because that small change can make a world of a difference in terms of not just your health, but the impact that you have in like your grocery shopping. And and you will find, I think, that the more that you introduce more plant-based foods, it becomes more and more of the option that you choose. So like when I make food for myself, all of my family who are not vegan, they want to try it, they want to eat it, and I'm like, no, go away, like this is my and it's because they genuinely enjoy vegan options now too. And I think that is a win, being able to have other people try things outside of themselves. Because especially when I was younger, if someone had said to me, you're going to be a vegan, like coming from a girl that used to eat steak, say cheese all the time, I wouldn't believe them. But knowing what I know now, it's so much more doable.
Yeah, like you said it, like a lot of people don't know, like, because when people hear vegan, they're like the first thought in their mind, oh, just salad. But
Yeah.
they don't know that. Yeah, I mean, they have everything. They have so many things now, more options now to be a vegan. I know one of my friends told me, like, she said Oreos. She told me Oreos is actually,
Vegan.
yeah, it's vegan.
Yeah.
So if you like, hey, if you, like, you can eat Oreos,
Yeah.
you can eat
It's
those
easy to
cookies.
be a junk food vegan. Like, I definitely have been, wilding out on my food intake, but it's Christmas, so.
It's Christmas time. That's good. Yeah, I do want to kind of transition topics a little bit. I know something that definitely want to spend some time on. I know you're passionate about as well. It's talking about the academic pathway to unrepresented groups. So I kind of want to shift focus over there and spend some time on that. Yeah. So yeah, I want to give it to you and kind of let you talk about it.
So one of the areas of community work that I love to focus on is mentoring underrepresented groups in tertiary education to feel empowered to pursue a pathway in law. My focus is on law, but in any degree that they wish to pursue. In New Zealand, we have a steady growth of Pacific people who are graduating from university with their tertiary qualifications, but we're still a minority in terms of law school. So my focus in terms of the community work that I do is to help bridge the path between a lot of students who are dealing with cultural, most of the time it's cultural burdens conflicting with their ability to actually go to school. So it's like, oh, I can't do this assignment because I was up all night doing this church thing or doing this and that. And it's very difficult for them to actually commit their time 100% into whatever it is that they're doing without the support of their community. With the ones that have the support of the community, they're thriving. These students, they're doing the best that they possibly could. They're getting in there, they're getting the top grades and doing incredible. But my focus is on allowing students to actually use that community, whatever community involvement that they have, to allow them to actually get into whatever degree that they want to get into. So I'm a committee member for Auckland Women's Lawyers Association, and a lot of the work that we do is to help women feel empowered, not just within the law, but not just students and lawyers and judges and everyone, but feeling mentored as a community so that we can help them. And my particular role that I've been focusing on is helping them, helping Pacific women feel empowered to actually pursue law. And so my passion, if you will, is to see more Pacific people come into tertiary education pursuing specialist degrees, like whether it's law, medicine, engineering, architecture, and then actually utilizing those degrees for that purpose and actually practicing it. That's what I really, really hope to see within the next 5 years. And it's incredible because, we have various scholarships that are out targeted specifically for at-risk groups, Pacific Maori groups here in New Zealand. And I think that the more educated or the more empowered that we feel to get educated in particular topics that we're really passionate about, the more informed that we are on what we want to do in our future. And I genuinely don't believe that I would be where I am today if it weren't for the education pathway that I had taken in actually going to university, getting my law degree and my arts degree, and utilizing it for this very purpose. So I just really hope that if there's anybody out there who wants to study, wants to go into a difficult program or a degree, that they feel empowered to actually do it and never feel deterred by their circumstances, because that's kind of the energy that you need to motivate you to, on those days that you just feel like you can't do anything, that's what's going to give you the energy and motivation to actually do it. That's how I felt when my mom was sick. She truly did. She was the catalyst at the end of my degree to actually finish it. yeah, so that's kind of a lot of the work that I love to focus on outside of being a lawyer. And hopefully next year we can do even more work and reach out to even more communities in terms of scholarships and things for Pacific women in their pathway to law and helping them with that. And yeah, to be continued, hopefully.
Wow, I mean, man, wow, that's powerful and that's so great. And I feel like that's not only needed, but like, is that only in New Zealand? Is that across the world? Is that global, or is that only domestic?
It's only in New Zealand, so it's the scholarship that we offer is only within New Zealand. But I mean, if other people get influenced by this and want to start up their own organizations and do the same, that would be beautiful as well. Because I mean, the more networks that we have that actually empower the youth to pursue tertiary education, the better. And so, I mean, I'm happy to help in whatever way that I can in terms of like the kind of the model that we follow. So that other people can follow suit, that would be incredible.
Yeah, because I could totally relate to it, because what you said, when you said that there are, the kids out there that want to expand and they want to grow and they want to be successful in their life, but they feel the burden or tied to their cultural, to their culture of what they grew up in, especially like, being Polynesian. I know we have a lot of cultural obligations and functions, and not only I've experienced it myself, and I know a lot of friends that it's really, really hard to focus on yourself and do what's best for you in the Polynesian culture, because we're a culture of always helping and giving to our family no matter what. Whatever your parents ask of you, whatever your church asks of you, whatever the community asks of you, it's our responsibility. We're taught that it's our responsibility to always fulfill it as kids. And I know a lot of kids and a lot of that I know a lot of friends that they want to do something. They want to go to college. They want to get a degree. They want to make decisions for themselves. But they're just tied to what taking care of their parents or fulfilling the family business, or there's a function and something going on. They have to drop everything in their life and go take care of this function if they need it, not only emotionally, mentally, but also financially. And a lot of times, they put themselves they don't have enough resources for themselves, because they've given all their resources to their community, to their culture, and then there's nothing left for themselves. And that's why I'm doing what I'm doing, because I'm a big advocate for self-love, for doing what's best for you, for your own happiness. Because I've just seen it too many times within our own culture, where we place we put everybody else as a priority. We put the culture as a priority. We put the family as a priority, but we don't put ourselves as a priority, and we end up suffering in the process. And then when it's all said and done, there's nothing left for you, and then you're miserable.
Yeah, and I think and at the same time, you're never, if you keep living like that, you're never going to be upskilling yourself. And there is a certain point where living for yourself is not selfish. It's actually necessary.
Yeah.
And that's something that needs to be known in the culture, because it's like, oh, well, she needs to take a moment for herself because she's just done all of these things. He's just done all of these things. It's not selfish to do that and not have the ability to, you can't be saying yes to every single thing in your life. You just can't.
Yeah.
You can't balance that. And I think that when it conflicts with especially something that requires so much of your time, like education, then the priorities and being able to speak with whoever it is that's supporting you and allowing them to understand that this is really important, and that it's essentially an investment in all of, whoever's lives are going to be impacted by that person who's, going to study. So yeah, it's a fine balance.
Yeah. So I want to ask you is, of all the people, because you said you're part of the program, on the board, on the committee. So out of all the kids and the students that come through you, what are the main struggles that you see that they find it hard to overcome, based on the people that you help and serve?
I would say outside, because I'm also an Auckland Women's mentor for the University of Auckland.
Yeah.
I think specifically with that, so I had indicated to them that I wanted to mentor, if I could, Pacific law students.
Yeah.
And the number one thing that I would find is a difficulty for them is actually balancing their life circumstances with university. And I mean, because I used to be a tutor at university as well when I was studying. And it's like I said, it's difficult because sometimes it's things that are actually out of their control. It's not even the cultural anymore. It's, you know, they literally cannot go to class because they have to work, because otherwise they will literally lose their homes. Like that's how hard it is, how stark it is for some people. And so it's not necessarily that they're just flaking off and not coming to class. It's literally lose their job and be homeless, or go to university and get that education and then suffer not having a home, or whatever the case may be. And I think that firstly, understand the resources that your university has available to you. We have a lot of hardship scholarships at the University of Auckland that helps people in those circumstances. And even when you are going through that, knowing that going to class is great, but we have the luxury of technology now where we can actually have classes be pre-recorded or recorded, so you can catch up in your own time when you have the time. It's not ideal to be working through such difficult times and then having to come back home and then focus and study, but it's necessary. That's what you have to do sometimes. Like when I was working as a tutor, it actually conflicted with a lot of my law classes. And so it was either I had to give up being a tutor and go to law class, or I can try and manage both. And so what I did was I got my friend to have the classes recorded and I was lucky I had a friend who would actually do this, give me the slides. And after work, I'd go home and I would do that. I would go through my slides, go through the lectures, and make sure that I was up to speed like everybody else. And it's just finding things that work for your lifestyle and work for you, and knowing that there are resources out there that can help. Like you don't have to struggle alone, especially if it's a financial struggle. There are various ways that the university do try to help. I don't know what it's like in America though, so might be a little bit different.
That's that's. I mean, I'm pretty sure. I don't know. I know one of my friends has a nonprofit. There are organizations that try to help out Polynesians, but for me, like I basically living here since most of my life, I never heard of any organizations or things that that target Polynesians, especially that feel like that their life circumstances is making them harder to get an education. That's just the first time I've ever heard that.
Wow.
I wish there was something like this out here, because I know there are a lot of kids out there that's just growing up in like you said, growing up in a household where everybody has to pitch in. Everybody has to work. If they don't work, that means that they won't be able to pay the mortgage, won't able to pay their bills. But and that's why I'm always but I think that's one of the hardest challenges as a kid growing up and realizing like, okay, like I want to do something for myself. And I know for everybody's different, because I've gone through my own life growing up where I know those days where I get a paycheck and the paycheck's gone. And the next day I had to give it up. I had to give it up. So there's nothing I didn't have, I had to struggle myself. I just give the money, give my paycheck. But for me, as I grew, for me, I thought for me, I've always like tried to think like 5 steps ahead. Okay, where is this leading to? So when I realized, okay, I'm getting paid, I'm giving my paycheck to my family to pay the bills. But for me, I just saw like it wasn't leading anywhere. Every week I'm giving my paycheck.
Just paycheck to paycheck.
And then our bills we kept piling up on bills. We still accumulated more debt, and I just realized that it's not really our issue. Is just our lifestyle and the choices we're making financially, and that we're not changing anything. We're still living the same way when it comes to our finances, and I just saw that I couldn't, for me, from a personal, I couldn't see myself doing this my whole life. Like I realized like something has to change. And if my family doesn't change their spending habits and their way they live financially, because they want to give all their money to the hafakasi and to the misinales and to the misinales and we're struggling at home. I never understood that part of our culture where we'll give our resources to function,
And then
but our kids, at home we'll struggle with our kids, and our kids won't have enough money for school or for what they're trying to do for themselves to better themselves. But then we ask the kids to go to work to pay off.
No, what's interesting, Will, that you mentioned a really good point is at church there there's a lot. My church it's basically like a white church. And there are so many more Tongans who are coming to that church now because they're like, you know what, we can't financially afford to be a part of a church anymore. And we just want to go worship and love God and ask for forgiveness and do that. We can't afford all the other stuff. So that's why we're coming here. And they drive like an hour or 2 hours out to come to this church.
Wow.
And and it just goes to show that it doesn't mean they're any less dedicated to God. It just shows that they're giving all that money. I'm like, I've never understood it, especially if it's putting the family in debt. If you got the money and you can do it, good for you. But if you don't, then you shouldn't feel that pressure.
And not only, and what the worst part of what I see is not only when you give up the money, when that money should have gone to debt, is asking the kids to sacrifice their life to pay that debt that you accumulate as a parent. Like, no, the kids did accumulate that debt. You accumulated that debt. And now you're sacrificing your kids' future.
And then it's a cycle.
Exactly, that's when it becomes a cycle. Now the kids live in poverty. Now they're stuck in that poverty, you know, in their mindset and they have to give up their education, their beliefs, and what they want to do. And then for most part, they're gonna have kids in debt. So when they have kids, they're already in debt, and then they're gonna ask their kids to pay off their debt. So it's like, and then for me, that was one of the hardest decisions for me because when I had to give up the courage to tell my family, no, I'm not gonna help out financially anymore. And that was one of the toughest decisions I've ever had to do, because I just realized that this cycle has to stop. Like, if nobody's gonna say I have to do anything, you know, I'm gonna take some time away. I knew
exactly.
Huh? Exactly.
The change starts with you.
Right, exactly. So if nobody wants to say anything, and I knew the ramifications and the criticism, the judgment I was gonna get, and one of the biggest thing I hated was when I biggest thing I hated was when I did that I had the label of being a that alpha, like that alpha kid.
Again, like the trash.
Yeah, I'm like, man, you guys just forgot everything I've done, huh? All the money I've invested in, like, all those times are healthy, but just the one time I decided to like focus on myself and better myself. And like
you
can't
help other people unless you have helped yourself. I mean, when you're on a plane and it's literally going to crash and burn,
exactly,
you're supposed to help yourself because you can't help the kid beside you if you're dead. So you doing what you have to do to help others is what's necessary. And I think that's like when it's like that alpha, whatever, all of that irrelevant, completely irrelevant. Because at the end of the day, it's those very people who are probably going to come to you when you've made it, and they're like, "Do you remember me?
Hey, I'm the Hey, remember I fed you when you were like 2 years old? I gave you I changed your diaper." Oh, we have to go that far back. I know, and then to surround it with so different people, and then for me, like, I think one of my favorite advice I ever got from I don't know if you've probably heard of it. He's the only keynote speaker, motivational Tongan speaker I know in America that's actually being a motivational speaker. That's his full-time profession. His name is Coach Viliami Tuivai. He's on social media, so if you never heard of him, go check him out. But I actually connected with him and asked him to be a mentor. But he told me, like, one of the best advice he told me was, like, he said the problem with Polynesians is that we give out of our poverty instead of giving out of our prosperity. You know, the reason, if you look at rich people, the reason why rich people are rich is they got rich and they came back to help their family. They didn't help their family while they were broke, while they were on the process. One of them decided to take it to the next level, and then it didn't come back. And once they prospered, they came back and help out their family. And he always told me, look, no matter what criticism, no matter the hate and the judgment of people, just understand that you're more valuable to society if you're successful. You know, you're not valuable. And that changed my mindset. Oh, okay, because I used to feel the hate and the negativity. I just feel like, oh my God, like, am I that alpha kid that that, you know, everybody thinks I am. And I used to let that get to me, but then I realized, wait, I can actually do more for my family if I strive towards my goals and dreams. If I just take some time away and just go do what I got to do, then I can come back with more resources. But I can't be as valuable as I can to my family if I'm just I'm not happy, I'm broken, and I'm financially struggling. So I really had to change that narrative and my mindset of how I saw things. But that's something like this, and I guess that's why I love when you talked about that program you guys have about having that for kids that are struggling with their culture, with their life, and helping better assisting them. And because I definitely would have. I mean, I definitely would love if we not only have that in my own life, but for everybody out here that's going through it, and especially for everybody out here that's watching this podcast right now.
Yeah, hopefully someone starts up their own Pacific Association in America. I thought there was one, but
you know, when I get to that point, I'm saying this right now. I'm manifesting it right now. I'm gonna start it. That's cool. I'm gonna reach out to you. Hey, what do we do? I need you. Because I just felt that, because when you share that story, I was like, man, I wish that there was some kind of a support system, and not trying to figure out everything on our own. Because that's why I feel like a lot of kids, when they venture off and doing something for themselves, it's like, you know, it's you're going out like no man's land when you're by yourself, and you just feel sometimes you just feel all alone. Like, wow, I have to figure out everything on my own, and nobody in my household or my family or my culture is going to support me. But that's life. Sometimes you have to do that and figure it out. But yeah, man, that's a wish. Yeah, that's something I see a lot within our own Polynesian culture. Yeah, so I do want to bring up also, like, when you talked about, so because I know you're on social media, all right. So I do want to talk about is social media just a platform that you use to put yourself out there, or are you really trying to do something with your social media and grow?
I think with social media, it's for me certainly one-sided. It just pretty much only shows mostly the modeling. And that was kind of a conscious choice from my part, because I realized that I didn't want people kind of knowing or snooping around too much about my life. Especially because the community is so small. And so it's essentially an extension, I guess, of kind of my modeling portfolio. And it's done incredible things. Like Serena Williams shared me on her Instagram page, that's probably how I got probably the most followers, was from that moment.
Oh, nice.
And then just, you know, having that connection with like different brands, and like, I'm not sure if you're aware of the platform iWay. It's facilitated by Jamila Jamil, and she's so unapologetically herself, staunch feminist, and I absolutely love what she stands for. And they featured me on their platform. And it wasn't so much that I thought, oh, I'm going to use this to do something. It was just I was using it to kind of just say what I felt like saying, and just posting. I mean, some of the stuff I'm posting is just a selfie. And I'm like, I feel like I look good today, I'm going to post it. Like, there's nothing wrong in that. Like, who cares? And I feel like that just resonated with other people. And that's kind of what I guess picked up with, you know, other platforms who then wanted to reach out and, you know, feature me or whatever it was. And it's just kind of gone from there. But it is definitely one-sided in the sense that nobody knows, mostly nobody knows until they read my bio, which I now have it in my bio, that I'm a lawyer, you know, that I have 3 degrees. You know, I was chosen as the inaugural Obama leader, where I got to meet Obama and Michelle Obama.
Oh, wow.
And so, you know, nobody knows that kind of aspect of me. It's literally just mostly the modeling. Sometimes I'll I'll share it on Instagram, but I think it's kind of an intentional representation of myself, in terms of that it is an extension of modeling. And like, sometimes I'll like post me and like my family and stuff. But you know, the things that I don't mind sharing. that's kind of what I want to do. And like, yeah, connecting with people I think is cool. Like meeting you through social media is really cool. I think that that's one of the real beauties of social media is that it would connect you to people that you ordinarily probably wouldn't have ever met, you know, especially if you're not in the same side of the world. So yeah, that's kind of what I try not to take it too seriously or like spend too much time on it because, you know, it can get really dark really fast. And I recently I was featured in Style magazine in New Zealand, and we spoke about cancel culture. And I find it to be quite disgusting, to be quite honest. And I feel like there is a toxicity, particularly in the Polynesian community, where it perpetuates this cancel culture. And that's the dark side of social media.
Let's talk about it.
yeah, the dark side of social media is where, you know, if you have an opinion that's different to others, if you have a political belief that's different to others, or if it's not the status quo or whatever it is, you're immediately cancelled. And I think that that is really problematic. So I try to steer clear from those types of that type of content on my page because, so yeah, I essentially made the conscious decision to make it an extension of my modeling portfolio mostly, and just like food. and, yeah, and just like whatever I feel like.
How was it? How was meeting Obama? How was that experience?
Oh, that was crazy. You know, it was insane because like the year before that, my stepmom, she bought me Becoming by Michelle Obama, and I read because obviously I really admired their stories. They were both lawyers, and obviously he went on to become one of you know, arguably the most powerful person in the world, but not just any president, the first African American president in America. And so I've always really admired their stories, regardless of what anybody's political affiliations are. You can't really deny that you have two people from historically marginalized groups become kind of this beacon of hope and success story for so many to aspire and look up to. And so anyways, I read her book and I found it to be, you know, it was like incredible. And I remember thinking, and I told my partner this, it was so funny because like after I read the book, I was in Tonga when I finished it. This is a year before, I had no idea I was going to meet them or even become an Obama leader. But I remember saying to him, I was like, I wonder what it would be like to meet Michelle Obama and Barack Obama. And he was like, maybe you will. And I was like, oh, that's like crazy. Like that's just crazy. Like how could that happen? And then obviously in 2019, I was chosen as an inaugural member of, you know, the 200 that was selected to become Obama leaders. And we got flown out to Malaysia. And yeah, got to meet both of them. He comes up and he's like, hey, how you doing? And I'm just like, whoa. Like, I'm so struck right now. We were in the middle of making chairs and tables for our school that was going to be sent over to a school. And so I was making a chair and he's like, what are you doing? And I was like, he's like, what's your name? And I was like, I'm Lanu. I'm Tongan, New Zealand. It's an honor to meet you. And he was like, what are you guys doing? And I was like, I'm making a chair. Do you want to test it out? And he was like, yep, sure. So then I got my chair and I was like, please, God, do not fail me.
Don't break.
Do not break. And he sits on the chair and he's like moving around and I'm like, ugh. And he stands up and he's like, great chair. And then like, he started talking about, he asked like, what do we do? I was with another guy. What do we do? And I just basically told him what I do. And then he was like, very nice to meet you. And then he went on his way. And then shortly after I met Michelle and she came over and that was surreal. That was really surreal. And I just was like, do you know where Tonga is? And she was like, of course I do. And I was like, okay, that's cool. Like, do you have any plans to go there? And she said she had plans to come to New Zealand first and then hopefully one day to Tonga, which is, I think, is really cool. But yeah, it's a surreal moment to think that even the most unbelievable things in your life that you think you can't ever achieve or do or meet or see or whatever, that it really is obtainable. And it can happen in the most, in ways you don't even know yourself yet. you really just have to believe that it can happen.
You know what I love about your not only you meeting Obama, in your story, because you know we've been doing this podcast for and you've been talking about your whole life, and then the narrative of your story is that you've always challenged the status quo, like you know, right? And the reason why I'm bringing this up, because I definitely want the audience to listen to hear this, is like, you know, because of the decision you've made in life, because everybody knows life is about decisions, right? So who we are today is based on the decisions we make. Doesn't matter your culture, doesn't matter where you come from, doesn't matter which part of the world you're watching this from. You know, your decisions determine where you're going to be. And you've had a habit, and you've always been that type of person that you just challenged everything, and you weren't afraid, or you did unapologetically because you just wanted to be yourself and make your own, and you know, make your own life for yourself. And it's just crazy how every single decision that you've gone through and every single experience you've gone through have led you to meeting Barack Obama, right? You know, because like, you know, that's that, you know, how people don't understand, like meeting like not only a president but also meeting Barack Obama, like, you know, the leader of the free world. And which, so, you know, like what are the chances of that happening? But not only as, like, you know, a Tongan, right? Like from Tonga, I grew up in Tonga. Like people don't, you know, for me, I'm just thinking like, man, that's so powerful. Like that's so cool to, you know, able to do that. And then like for me, I'm just feeling like it's so inspired right now. I just want to jump through a wall.
Well, it can happen to anybody.
But that's what I'm saying.
Crazy is that it can literally happen to anybody, and it really isn't one of those things like, well, like you don't know what could happen with your podcast, like you don't know what could happen in the future. And there are times where like you're literally in the rut, and you're like, what the hell is the purpose? And nothing is coming from any of what I'm doing. And it's that moment, it's between that moment and persevering past it that beautiful things happen. So many people give up on the it's not working. Sometimes it genuinely isn't working and you have to move on to something new. But if you're actually giving up just because it's hard, then that's failure. Not trying is failure. Actual failure isn't failure because at least you tried.
Yeah, and like I said, like, you know, just hearing the whole story of you living your own life and all the criticism and all the doubt and all the people that, you know, their judgments and their hate, and you sticking to your own path, and then like I said, and that led to you to being a great lawyer, led to you being a model, led to you becoming one of the 200 leaders selected for Obama, to meeting Obama. But it's just, I mean, it's just so great to hear. And then for me, it's just like for any kid out there that's watching this right now, like just understand that nothing's impossible, that there's so many, that anything can happen, but you just gotta, you know, do what's right for you, and have confidence in your own decision of where your life is taking you.
Yeah.
And that's so,
and
man, that's the
like, actually, like, seriously, that's the one thing. Don't be deterred by the rubbish. So many people disconnect from the culture because they can't deal with it anymore.
Yeah.
It's not the culture, it's the people. just don't be deterred by it. It happens. It is, if it's happening to you, then that means you're probably doing something right. Because it means you're challenging what is the ordinary. And I think it's a good thing.
Yeah. So yeah, I think man, we talked about the one thing. I think the last thing I just want to cover before we end this podcast. I do want to talk a little bit about mental health. You know, mental health, your experience, what you see in New Zealand, what you see within the culture, what you see within your circle. And because I do understand that a lot of the struggles that we go through, not only as people, but as Polynesians, is dealing with mental health, the anxieties, the fears, and the insecurities that we have. And I understand that mental health within the Polynesian culture is something that's not taken seriously. A lot of the elders think it's not real. it's a fallacy.
Yeah.
But they think it's like PC. No,
yeah.
Just go lau PC. Because for the elders, they think, okay, if I feed you, I clothe you, you have a place to sleep, mentally you're good. That's their MO. So, but yeah, I want to ask you is, you know, what's your experience with mental health? And how is it, you know, how is it with mental health in New Zealand? because I read something in an article. It was very interesting. It said that I was reading a survey of it was a mental health article, and it was talking about suicide, and it was talking about I was reading statistics about suicide in different parts of the world, and it said that the people, the city or the location that had the most amount of suicide per capita, especially when the younger generation, especially from 16 to 25, in the entire world, guess where the number one place where people that age group commits the most suicide? Do you know where that is?
Is it New Zealand?
Yes, it was New Zealand.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't know if that was right, but it was an article I read. It came from a legitimate new study. But when I read that, I was like, wow. I was like, that blew me out the water, because like I know New Zealand, yeah, right. And I know there's a lot of Polynesians there, and then I was just like, and I was blown out the water when I saw that statistic. Where out of all the places in the world, New Zealand, you guys had the most, depending on that age group, that suffered from mental health, but also that led to suicide. So,
but interesting is that, to add to that, the proportion of suicides were predominantly male Polynesian.
Yeah, and that's something that a lot of people don't talk about as well. So I want to ask you, I just want to ask you your experience with it in your own life journey, and then what you see out there in New Zealand, and especially with the people with your own perspective. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think growing up, especially in today's day and age, when you've got such a oversaturation of information available to you, you can feel overwhelmed, especially when you're like looking at people on social media and you're comparing yourself and you're thinking, God, look, she's done all of this and I've done absolutely nothing. Or you never feel like you're good enough, because there's always somebody who's doing better than you. And I think even just analyzing your circumstances, you're never sitting there thinking, wow, I did really good today. Rarely do you think that, like, I did really good today. But you will always remember every little mistake that you've made, every bad thing you've ever done, and you beat yourself up for it. And like, I'm kind of the typical victim of that, where I never give myself a moment to just like enjoy the moment in a way. Like it's always, okay, now I've done that, I need to move on to the next thing, and I need to try and do something better. And I speak about this a lot, actually, but I'm somebody, which is surprising to a lot of people, I actually take failure really hard. Like it really deters me a lot. And I fail a lot. Yeah. I fail a lot, and it really affects my mental health. And there's no shame in admitting that, but it is really difficult for me to get back up after I've tried so hard to do something, and then I don't get it. And I'm like, well, crap. Like, am I not good enough? Do I suck? And that's something that I need to like move on and get past. And like eventually I do, and I move on from it. And then I realize that having those feelings are a part of the process, and not getting stuck in that is what is the difference between being productive and letting the situation overwhelm you. Obviously, mental health is a huge and broad subject where people have chemical imbalances, and there's no harm in getting help in whatever form that takes, whether it's therapy, medication, whatever it is. But for me personally, what I found is having things that I'm passionate about and doing that, and like letting that basically fulfill my soul, and being with my family and my friends. Like my niece, especially my nieces and my nephew, they really bring me so much joy. But my little niece, my sister's daughter, I could be having the worst day after a full 3-day trial, whatever it is, and I'll come home and I'll see her little face, and it literally is like a switch has just turned off, where it's like nothing matters, and that's like the only thing that really matters is family and actually connecting with them. And I guess, like I said, I'm lucky in the sense that I've got a really strong family support and an amazing network of people. But in saying that, I'm really conscious that it's not available to everybody. And like you were saying, New Zealand does have one of the highest statistics for suicides, and a proportion of that is majority Polynesian male. When I was at school, there was a spate of suicides, and most of them were trying to be rugby players, where it was becoming a national issue. Why are all our Pacific men killing themselves in New Zealand?
Yeah.
And there were different areas that were explored, and it was, you know, the pressure of not being able to fulfill the rugby dream. If you weren't a rugby player, like a successful rugby player, then you were essentially a failure.
Yeah.
And it's like you're what good are you now? Like if you're not
exactly. Yeah.
And it was just the cultural pressure of not being able to express themselves. A lot of males in the Polynesian community, especially in the Tongan community, I went to this art exhibition of my cousin, actually, and he did the most incredible art exhibition, and it was essentially portraying masculinity in Tonga.
Yeah.
It was for his PhD, and he spoke about how him as a Tongan artist, he was often told to be younger whakatangata.
Yeah.
Act like a man, like, and he didn't know what that meant. And he's like, does that mean I have to like beat people up and like, you know, play rugby? Like, I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in art. And so he was often, you know, having to battle that notion of being a manly man, and it affected him. And it affects so many males and Polynesians growing up, because if they don't live in that norm or in that kind of mold that's been set for them, they feel so isolated to the point that they are overwhelmed with their emotions, especially if they have depressive issues or going through things internally. That will only add and overwhelm it to the point where it's sadly take their own lives. And I think that when there is one or two, that when it's occurring and like it's a one-off, then you can think, okay, well, what's going on there? It's a bit of an off situation. But when it's happening predominantly in one community at an overwhelming number, well, the community needs to start looking at themselves and thinking, what are we doing that is forcing these people to think that they are no longer worthy to live here anymore? Or what are we doing that's forcing them to think that they don't have the support to turn to us?
Yeah.
So it's, mental health is something that I think is so important in the Polynesian community because it's not spoken about enough. It's joked about, especially, and I think it's hardest for men because of the connotations that are imposed on men in the Polynesian community, and the expectations of being the man of the house and all these kind of things. And if you aren't there, then you will always feel inadequate. And I think that having these conversations in the culture, not just having the conversation, but actually having the ability to make some kind of change, make a comfortable space for people to speak about what they're feeling, that will help in some way. And then obviously making sure that they refer to the right, the right sources and getting the help they need. But if you yourself can help in any small way, I think that that's really important.
Yeah, and like you said, what you said was absolutely true. And then and that's something I always want to ask everybody out there that one of the hardest things about suffering with mental health, because I've gone through my own moments in my life where I just I was dealing with depression and I was suffering mentally. We're just so afraid to ask for help. Because like I said, like for me, it was being a Tongan man, talking about my emotions and what I've been taught was not what a man does. Right? If you express your emotions, if you talk about being weak and being moments of being weak or being in a weakened state emotionally, or expressing how you feel, then you're laughed about, joked about that you're too soft or you're not a man. And for the longest time, I wouldn't even bring anything up. I would try to bottle it up, try to tell myself I'm okay, there's nothing wrong with me, and just and just put those emotions to the side. But just over time, it just overwhelms and becomes like a ticking time bomb when eventually it's gonna blow up one day. And and luckily I didn't get to that point. I didn't wait till my bomb exploded.
You have the self-awareness, I guess.
Yeah, I realized that something was wrong with me, and I think a lot of us try to pretend like nothing's wrong with me, because this idea of men being, we have to be strong all the time as men. If I want to be a real man, maybe this Mama was like, maybe there's a test, maybe there's God testing me if I'm of being of my manhood or whatever. But I just realized no, something is wrong with me, and just understanding, and like I said, connecting with the right people and the right information. That's the beauty of social media. I started listening to content about mental health, listening to podcasting and information about mental health. Realize, oh wait, what I'm going through is not particularly designated just for Tongan. Everybody goes through this. All cultures, all people, everybody, not only men and women, but we all go through some point of our life where you just have these feelings, and having these feelings has no indication that something is wrong with me. This is what a human being does when we face with difficult situations. And I realized what I'm going through is normal. And understanding that kind of helped. Oh, okay, nothing's wrong with me. That doesn't make me less of a man. I'm just going through this phase of my life that we all go through as human beings. And then I finally had the courage to go ask for help, even though I went and asked for help. I didn't ask for help from my Tongan community because I didn't want anybody to know.
It's a personal struggle, and it's good on you for actually getting the courage to do that, because the strength is in asking for help. The strength isn't in people think that there's strength in not showing emotions. I find that so it's so transparent.
Yeah, plus it's not true because we all have emotions.
Well, exactly. You're not we're humans. We're not robots. Like you can put on the facade all you want, but people are more aware of the facade now, I think, and so the strength is in asking for help. So yeah, good on you for doing that.
Yeah, and then I believe that we need to change the narrative in our culture that asking for help is a weakness, right? And I think one thing I learned from somebody's content, I don't remember who it was, but he said that when you ask for help, it's not a weakness, it's actually a strength, because it shows that you care about yourself, that you're willing to let go of your pride, you're willing to let go of what's holding you back and be vulnerable, knowing full well that it's going to make you uncomfortable, but because you care about yourself so much, you're willing to overcome that. And people don't realize how much courage and strength it takes for somebody that's been taught their whole life that not to open up or to ask for help is seen as something that's weak. But when you start breaking your own limited way of thinking, your own cultural beliefs, because you care about yourself more than everybody else, then that's actually a really good strength. So that's why I always tell my people that reach out to me and ask for help. I was like, look, if you ask for help, that shows you care. And so that's a good sign that you care about yourself.
Yeah, and you care about the other people around you, because when you're not your best, then you are not good for anybody. And it manifests itself in different ways. Like I know so many people who have, especially Polynesians, who turn to substance abuse, alcohol, to deal with their emotions and to deal with the depressive issues or tendencies that they're going through. And it's because they'd rather turn to that than actually be aware, sit down with themselves and ask for, what do I need to do to change this? And to be fair, some people genuinely do try to help and they can't. But I think that as long as that you're aware that the one step forward is admitting that you might have a problem, and then trying to deal with it.
Yeah, and what I see, in our community, that because we don't talk about mental health, or we don't have discussions about our feelings, is we don't develop emotional intelligence to understand and internalize our feelings of how we feel, to know, okay, this feeling is not this is not a normal feeling. Because we don't have the emotional intelligence, even when we're suffering, we don't lack the awareness to understand, okay, having these suicidal feelings is a bad thing. We need to, you probably need to go ask for some help. And that's one thing I hear, and I hear from a lot, because like a lot of Polynesians are suffering. A lot of Polynesians are hurting inside and have these crazy suicidal thoughts, but they don't understand. They feel like, oh, maybe they think, they don't realize how those feelings are not good. It's not good feelings to have, or what's normal. They just think, okay, this is just something that I go through. It's eventually gonna go away.
Yeah, or they don't know how to deal with those feelings.
Yeah, and then act on it. Yeah.
That thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So Yeah. So yeah, I'm glad to hear about that from your own opinion. And yeah, I mean, in America, I don't hear a lot about mental health stuff being talked about on a national scale, but yeah, I do. But that's something I heard from people that live here, but come from New Zealand. They told me that there's a lot of suicide, especially for the men uh, that don't live up to their dreams, and especially the rugby players.
Yeah, I mean, even when in Tonga, I remember there was like a point where there was actually a lot of suicides for girls.
Mm-hmm.
I remember this one girl who I remember, like, because I was so young that
Mm-hmm.
just when something so tragic like that happens, it sticks with you. And I remember that all the rumors were swirling around at school, like
Mm-hmm.
what happened, all this kind of stuff. And the number one, like we later found out that she had killed it. So this young girl had killed herself, hung herself outside of her house. And trigger warning, this is really sad, but we later found out that she had snuck out and had gone to a bar. She was probably like 16. I was like 9 or something at the time, or 8. I was really young, but it was just so sad because we had a moment of silence, all that kind of thing. And yes, we later found out she had basically got caught sneaking out, and couldn't live with it, and killed herself. And that was something that had happened quite often when I was in Tonga.
Yeah.
So it's not just in New Zealand. I think that Polynesians all over the world are really struggling with mental health issues and not knowing how to navigate those emotions and feelings, and even like their circumstances, things that are happening to them. It's hard to grapple with.
And yeah, totally true. And like I said, like I feel like for me that's one thing. Like whenever a cousin hit me up and people reach out to me and express to me what they're going through, I always give the time, because I feel like that's me knowing if they're talking to me, that means they probably never had that from their own home or from their own household, and that's why they're reaching out to me. That's why I feel like I'm always give some time to check up on people to make sure they're okay. But you see it but also you can see a lot of social media, like people when you see something, when you see someone venting on social media about what they're going through, and sometimes I know there's a lot of criticism, a lot of people will joke around about somebody, okay, why is this person airing out their dirty laundry or whatever they're going through on social media. In my mind I was like, for somebody to put themselves out on social media, it just shows me that that nobody's listening at home, because they've got to.
That's a good point.
You know what I'm saying? Whenever you see somebody post something on social media about something that's really personal that maybe they shouldn't post, and you're judging them, criticizing, if you understand like the mentality, for that person to put themselves out there on social media, it just means that he or she has got to a point in their life that nobody's hearing them at home with their own life, that they feel that they need to put themselves out there to feel the validation of people, because they're not getting that validation from their own life to that point. Because naturally, as a normal human being, you wouldn't just put all your stuff out there. But if you feel like you're not getting heard, you will put themselves out there. And whenever I see people put themselves out there, I always like feel so much love for them. I was like, dang, like, man, they must be going through a tough time in their life right now, for them to expose themselves like that. And I would just wish we just had more support systems and more understanding at home, especially with the Polynesian community, to be able to finally teach our parents. But I do realize that when it comes to mental health, it just starts with us, from our generation, and we have to be the one to educate our kids, our future kids, and next generation. But yeah, I think, I feel like we've gone through a lot. I know it's been a long time, because I had to turn on the light for myself. It's getting dark outside. I was like, oh, I didn't notice it. I just looked at my own camera. I was like, wait, I can't even see my face no more, because we were just having some great discussions, and I've been enjoying having on the podcast. But I think we've got to the end, and man, like, it's been a blessing. I'm very grateful, and I loved how you shared your story, and then I loved everything you've explained about your life and what led to you being who you are today. And I know a lot of people are going to watching this kind of resonate with it. I think the last thing I just want to ask you is, I always ask every person that I invite to the podcast, it's just give you to end it off with just saying some final words to everybody, I know that everybody's listening. I know there's a lot of people that's going to watch this and they can resonate, and there's something that you share that can definitely help them with their own life. So I just want to ask you if you can just end off our podcast with just some final words for everybody that's watching, and give them some final words of motivation, whatever you want to say, anything at all.
I think the final thing that I would say is that when you're trying to do something that's different to what's culturally expected of you, or just expected of you in general, is to stay true to yourself and to be consistent with what you believe is to be true. I shared this with you earlier, and I really do believe that culture doesn't make the people, it's the people that make the culture. And so when you're making that change in your life, you are part of the change in the culture that's only going to be for the better. And so, whoever's listening, I just really hope that they remember that you're going to go through tough times and you're going to go through criticism, and you just have to filter that out because it's irrelevant. And you are going to be part of the change that we want to see. And we are already we're seeing so many successful Polynesians out there changing the culture as they go. And it's incredible and encouraging to see. Whoever's listening, you'll probably be part of that change too.
And remember, I told you that's the original quote by Lanu. Original quote. Someone, definitely you need to make, like I said, you definitely need to make a picture and make that your quote. And that's and then timestamp it. All right. But like I said, thank you very much. I'm very grateful. I'm really appreciative. I know you're a busy woman, but thank you for taking the time and doing this. And like I said, everybody out there that's watching this, much love to you. And like I said, I'll definitely, if anybody wants to find out more about Lanu, check out the bottom of the page. I'll definitely make sure I'll tag her information on there on the platform, so you can go and start following her and support her and learn from her. So I'm about to close. I'm about to turn off the record button. I'm going to talk to you right after.
Okay. Cool.
Okay. All right. Cool. All right.